Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Survivor 47 for Survivor Global. I'm your host, Shannon Guss, here to discuss Episode 6, aka Mergatory, aka Merge. There was a reward challenge to an immunity challenge. Back in my day, we used to just call that a regular episode, but now it's a twist on a twist, and we have 360'd all the way back around to just being Survivor, which is great, and I'm very excited to talk about it with two guests. Got a bit of a duo here who tore it up. Return of the Outcasts. Got to the top three. One of them won. One of them technically didn't win, but that's not important. We're all winners here. Not me. They're both winners here on this podcast, and I'm very, very excited to talk about this with two huge super fans and incredible Survivor players in their own right. First up, it is the winner of Survivor South Africa, Return of the Outcast. He is a pre-merger, which I guess defines his identity, and we can talk about that today. It'd be great, Paulo. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Shannon, thank you so much for having me. As always, really, really fun to be on the pod. Always intimidating. I've always said this. I feel like an imposter coming sitting across you talking Survivor. You are the expert. But super glad I got my partner in crime here, Marian. I know we didn't actually have I was just thinking about this. We didn't have a name for our alliance, but it was probably one of the strongest alliances ever, which is quite funny.
Come up with that name.
We're gonna have to figure out a name at some point.
We'll come up with it today.
Yeah, Marino. Most close enough to Mariano.
Oh, wow.
Oh my god.
Oh my word.
Marian obsessed with Boston Rob. Dino, Marian, it's right. They're very excited. We've gotten ahead of not even introducing Marian, I will say. Third place, fan favorite, Survivor South Africa legend in her own right is the great Marian De Vos. Marian, thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me. Also, if Dina has imposter syndrome today, then I don't know what I have, because currently my anxiety has anxiety. But yeah, thank you for having me. This is my first podcast in maybe 2 years.
Which is so special. Thank you so much. You guys,
let's see how this goes.
you have imposter syndrome. How many days of Survivor have you each played? 2 seasons? Top 3 finish at least for both of you? Like, please stop it. But I am very excited that I immediately came up with the perfect alliance name. It took seconds. You guys were on the island together for weeks. Like, this is actually unacceptable, because I think it's perfect, right?
Also, Mariano's a big redemption for me, since he voted me out. It's my full name and he just gets an O. So
yeah, exactly. It's mostly Marian. Dino gets the N-O. Wow. The N connects it, and then we actually Dino's got the I-N-O, to be honest.
No, he's just got the O.
Just the O.
He's all the letters under 2 million, so can I just have it?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had a lot of O's. Yeah.
I'm eternally in debt to Marian, so I will take the L's from here on out. No problem. You just I'll take none of the letters whatsoever. We are the Marian Alliance. That's
great. That's great too. That's great too. This is so much fun. Dino, I was excited, when Andy said, if you are a pre-merger, that's your whole identity. What impact you made on the game. And then I'm like, well, we are having 2 people from the pre-merge versus post-merge season, including a pre-merger turned winner. So you know what, Andy? Things can be turned around, okay? If you are a pre-merger on the show. Do you know did that resonate for you as a pre-merger turned post-merger turned winner of the game?
So it's so interesting. I always have such empathy and compassion for pre-mergers in general. In particular since season 8, obviously. So all the new era pre-mergers, I reach out to a lot of the contestants, just be like, strength be with you, because I know what it's like. It is incredibly tough. No, it's not I just like people. I like people, but no, it's incredibly tough, and it's the side of the game that's difficult, that's not shown, is the post game and how you sit with the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, right? And everybody sits with them at some point, even if you get very close to the end, like Marian will tell you. I mean, she came as close as you possibly can. She'll have her own baggage, right? But going pre-merge, there's just so much more, particularly if you're a massive fan. So I know for Andy, this redemption and being able to turn his game around, and being that much closer to the jury would be massive. And he's warranted in saying that. It's a big thing. There is a big step. I mean, only a small portion of people don't make merge or don't make jury. You know, it's a smaller number than do. So like that FOMO gets even bigger. It's not like an exclusive club. It's an exclusive club that a lot of people are a part of, you know, the jury, but, and you're like one of the very few outsiders. So it's very intimidating. So it does resonate with me. And that's why, yeah, I'll never forget my path, you know, and appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny. Like in Marianne's wedding speech, she said how like Connor reached out to her. This is a bit of a tangent, but it's podcasting. You know, Connor reached out because she said, you know, what she said about Zach after he was voted out first, and she was like, so if Zach wasn't so bad at Survivor, you know, then this would not be happening. And I was like, Zach was across from me. I'm like, Zach, I don't think you're bad at Survivor. Like I had so much empathy for him in that moment. I'm like, you're not bad at Survivor, and he was just like, I don't care. So he seemed above it. But yeah, I always am like, no, like it breaks my heart for people who don't get the full experience. But that's why we need pre-merge versus post-merge seasons. Marian, as you said, you haven't podcasted in a while. How are you guys, firstly? Like before we kind of get into it, Marian, yes, it's been a long time. How have you been?
It's been a long time, and I'm going to be in a lot of trouble because I haven't podcasted in 2 years, but it's not a lack of like all the podcasters inviting me on. I'm very
Humble
open
brag.
that, you know, no. So I'm very open that I struggle with anxiety. So like things like this are very intimidating to me, even though like I've played twice, I've come third, I'm fan favorite. Like I love the game, I know the game, but like I don't know if it's like a public speaking thing, if it's like you're such a professional, Dino, so well spoken, like, you know. So yeah, I'm good. What's my life been like? I recently resigned from a very toxic job, so yay. I've also recently broken my finger, but yeah, I feel like resigning. I took control of my life. My mental health is the best it's been, I guess, in a year. I started a new degree at my big age, and it's killing me, but yeah, you know, life is life.
Putting that off to be here. We appreciate it.
Mentally, I'm good. Emotionally, I'm good. Yeah.
It's awesome. Dino, we heard from you more recently. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, still good. You know, still loving our business. I'm very grateful to do what I do. So, and that's been growing steadily, and we're going into peak season now. So lots of work, but the best kind. Personally, you know, Kirsten and I have still been living life in Cape Town. We really dig it here. Recently, we were away for a couple of weddings, and they were amazing, but it's always good to be back home here. So, yeah, I mean, we're in a good space. We're excited. Kirsten's also resigning from her job to move to another role or job. So that's very exciting for us because we can have more time to spend with each other, and lots of skydiving as much as I can get in. So yeah, things have been good. And yeah, that's why I guess I'm always happy to do things like this and just hang out with friends and chat about something that I really, really love, which is always Survivor.
Yeah, quit your job's very much the theme of that breakdown of your life, which is great. Yeah. I'm taking that on board. So excited to have you guys. Marian, thank you for skipping some lectures to be here. We appreciate it. This is the real lecture, the Survivor lecture. How have you been feeling about the season so far? Are you enjoying it? Who are like the standouts for you?
To be honest, I've been so busy with varsity work that I really only started watching the season on Thursday. So I binged it.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. And then I rewatched the last episode this morning. So yeah, I think my standouts currently, I love Sam. Genevieve, I like Genevieve. For me, she's got a little bit of poverty and a little bit of Kim Spalding. And then a whole lot of Genevieve, and I like that. Like she's her authentic self, but she's also got like a little bit of two of the best to ever do it. And then who else do I like? I think Teeny's so cute, and I feel like myself and Teeny would drink all the wine together. She's really adorable. I really like Sue. Yeah, and then I guess Kyle. I feel like Kyle's so endearing. He's just like an overall good guy that you just want to root for him. And then Rome.
Yeah.
So much to say about Rome, so much to unpack about Rome. He was interesting.
Yes. That's the thing about Rome is like you could not have a reaction to Rome. For how many millions of people watch the show, there is not one you could ask and be like, how do you feel about Rome? And they're like, I have no opinion on that. And I think that's important, you know, like when you're watching TV, love him or hate him. And I think that like at worst, you should like love to hate him. Like for me, I think Rob made the fair play comparison and I don't hate that either. Like he's a heel. And I think when a story kind of has, you know, he lost at the end of the day, like his actions had consequences. Someone like Sol wins after Rome gets a couple of wins. And like for me, that's like an interesting and very entertaining story. Even if like he's grading on you, like again, like that's an emotion. So yeah, Dino, how are you feeling about the season and Rome to this point?
Yeah, so I think it's a great new era season. I think production's finding far better balance with the with some of the game mechanics. They've refined them over time, and I think they're slowly but surely getting better. Not that I'm not saying I love everything that they're doing, but I think the things that they are doing, they're doing better than what they did before. From a casting perspective, I think their casting is just so good, man. I think the casting has been amazing. I love everybody and everybody's dynamics. Standout players for me as well. I mean, like Sam has been obviously standout, very, very vocal, great narrator. You know, I love his and Sierra's dynamics. It's been interesting to see how tight they are and trying to navigate, you know, personal interest over combined interest. Andy's been endearing in the sense that, you know, he had a catastrophic episode 1, and I know exactly what that is like, and he's been able to work his way back into the mix and survive, which is ultimately the objective of this game, is to survive. So I find that incredibly endearing to see him turning it around, which is great. You know, Carl's been great from a like Marian says, an endearing character. Also love Genevieve, exact same reasons. I think she's such a great balance of player. She's entertaining, quirky. She's not like good or bad. She's like a little bit of mischief, a whole lot of fun. So she's been an absolute pleasure to watch. She's like, I'm just going to keep going, rattling. Obviously, I'm out here hard, you know, in the Rachel corner, no doubt. And I'm super proud of my girl for how she's doing so far, especially after a really hectic blindside the previous episode. And on the Rome comment, I think, you know, he's casting gold. I think he makes it onto freaking every single casting list there is out there, you know, because he just delivers. And well done to him and anybody who plays the game. If you want to make an impact on the game, go out and do what Rome does. There's no guarantee that you're even going to make it to the end or make it to merge or whatever, but at the very least what he's done is he can truly say he's left it all out there, and big up to him for doing that. So not that I would be actively supporting him to win the game. You know, he probably rubs me up the wrong way, the way he rubbed a couple of players up, but he's phenomenal TV. So I think it's that entire mix is made for a great season so far. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, Rome brought the entertainment. You can't say that he wasn't, you know, a presence on screen, to the point where, though, what we see this week, I feel like has to be like near unprecedented. Like this is 12 people really kind of unanimously voting for Rome. And like the thing that's interesting about it, and we can talk through it, is like, you know, after every episode I try to think like who was this good for and who was this bad for. And like for something to be so communally beneficial, I feel for 12 people, well, Carl's not voting, but he would, right? So he's also really putting the name out there. So I think that this is beneficial for everyone. And that I think speaks to Rome. Yeah, and it speaks to a couple of things. But yeah, I think that like for Rome, especially for me, once Genevieve went out of her way to take away, and we can talk about, you know, the evolving nature of her move against Kishon, but once she went out of her way to save Rome against a good other option in staying with her other allies, because she had so many options, she goes out of her way to save Rome, to keep him, really for him, because she wanted to kind of nurture that. And then in the next episode, he goes to Sol, throws Genevieve under the bus, tells the truth to Sol about how Genevieve doesn't want to work with Sol, and Genevieve has to recover from that. I was like, all bets are off. Once he can do that to Genevieve, no one can work with him. So the interesting thing about this is, while like someone like Sue might have a bit of a Tiana problem, while Goddard might have a Rachel issue, while Carl is even a bit of a disconnect from someone like Sue, it's still, I think, better for them to have that like containable threat. Even someone like, yeah, Rachel is a bigger threat to me if I'm Sam as an example than Rome in what I can kind of envision. But Rome, who knows what he's going to do, you know, and no one can trust it. Even people he's giving real information to, like Sue, can never trust that Rome will not turn on you. He will turn clearly on anyone. So it's so beneficial to me for every person in the game to just get rid of that. And added benefit, it's a communal vote where no one has to put his name out. Like, he gets the ball rolling. Carl just reacts. Everyone can very passively just agree without putting themselves out there. Like, it's so easy and so right, to the point where I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that. So, Marian, do you agree? Can you see anything for anyone of why it might be valuable keeping Rome as like a shield or a distraction or anything compared to the fact of, but also what will he do and how scary is that, you know, in just like the fear of that?
I don't see that. Honestly, I wouldn't have kept him. He's just, I think he was a little too patronizing, but I also think he was doing way too much, way too fast. You know, I feel like if he had maybe gone to Oni Tiano or Oni Sam or Oni Sue and given them the information that Kyle passed on to him, like give it to one person and let that person's paranoia run with it and do the work for you, Rome would probably still be here. But you don't go to 3-4 different people and feed them stories. 4 paranoid people's a lot to deal with. So I think Rome's mistake was just spreading too much information too fast. He had to choose one target and let that target explode and run off with it. But also, again, you know, I've seen a lot of Rome hate online. And again, I always like stress the fact that how you play the game is not generally who you are in real life. Like, I don't think Rome is patronizing and manipulative and all these things in real life. I think Rome's problem, or the way, my opinion and how I see it, he wanted to come into the game and make a huge impact. And he had like this preconceived perception of what a great survival player should be and how they should act and what the confessional should be and what the fans sitting on the couch want to see. So I think he had like so much in his head, and had Rome just maybe dialed back a little bit and been a little bit more of his authentic self, I think he could have possibly gone far in the game, because he's not a bad player. Like, he really wasn't a bad player. I just think like he just did a little too much, a little too fast. And there was some distaste, you know, following Saul around. Was, you know, there's only one Boston Rob. He got the buddy system down, just like leave it, you know. You also don't come in and go like, there's a Boston Rob, surely, you know, I can beat Boston Rob Jr. I don't know what his exact words are. And again, there's only one Boston Rob. Like, why try and be like a second somebody else when you can be like your first authentic self? And I think that's what grates me about Rome. If I'm making sense.
I love Marian's like, I haven't podcasted in 2 years, guys. I really can't do that. She comes out and just drops good point after good point after good point. She's like, I've analyzed Rome as a human being. And he's like, it was great. Like, Marian, exactly. You have nothing to worry about. But I do think that is a really good point, because going to Sue, as an example, he got something done. Sue has a confessional where she's like, oh, I want Carl out. There's a real divide there. He's using real information that Carl did give him, and we can talk about that. Like, I think that you are right. Like, last week, Rome gave the information about Teeny's amulet to Sol, and that was good and true and real, and that could have made like some constructive, like progressive strategy around maybe Sol turning on Teeny. But then at the point that he throws Genevieve under the bus, again, way too far in the relationship with Genevieve, and Genevieve, it was true, but it wasn't verifiable. And now it all kind of gets mixed up into like, basically you're only as strong as your weakest lie. So now all of it's off the table, and Carl can like obfuscate. That's a hard word to say on a podcast. Why would I try? But Carl can cover for all of it, even though a lot of what Rome said about Carl was true. So had he picked one path and he actually made some impact with Sue, had he chosen his people to be like, he said you and Caroline were really close and all of these negative things about you, that might have been a path. But yeah, building on something like the Tiana thing, which really felt like he, as much as he in Exits is saying that's what Carl said, as much as he in Confessional was saying Carl said it, you know, that she was the biggest threat, we see Rome very much put it out and Carl say like, that's fair. So that didn't seem to make sense. That didn't vibe with the relationship that Carl and Tiana have had. Like, he went to the wrong people. You're right. He should have been like, I've got a lot of good information. Let me sift. You know, like he wasn't a good editor. Like, let me edit that down to what's valuable to me, choose the right relationships, move forward with them. And again, with Sue, it did work. But then it went so broad that then Carl had the chance to be like, oh, Sue, that's not what he meant. I can show that he has lied. So you are so right that had he chosen a path, he could have made good on some of that, but he didn't know how to not do it all. He was always doing just way too much, you know, that's obvious. But on one pathway, you know, there was some good stuff there that he could have just got rid of the rest to make good on that. What do you think, Dino?
No, so I agree. I think Marian's point of him actually being somewhat a good player, he had like really good concepts, and I think he just needed to slow down.
Concepts of a plan.
Really, and really good ones, and through a number of stages of this game. But he tried to do everything all at once to like the most extreme degree. And I think if he had slowed it down a little bit, and maybe didn't get drunk on the need to play hard and play big and control everything and drive everything and maybe fuel the own ego, and the story that just snowballed in his head of his perception of himself that just got bigger and bigger, he would have actually done some really great things in the game. He just needed to learn the art of subtlety, which I think Marian is an absolute pro at, if I do say so myself. Marian is the best person to talk about this in terms of like sowing seeds of chaos in a way that's not so in your face, right? And the reason I say that as well is because like you see in he plants the seed about Sam being this big threat, and it's true, people do see him as this big threat. It's been this overarching story that we've seen, right? People mentioning the power couple and he decides to throw his vote onto Sam, where you can hide in and amongst 12 other or 11 other votes, and throw one onto Sam to kind of feed a bit of paranoia on Sam's side, so a bit of discord. What would you say? Yeah, just sow seeds of doubts, in people's minds, and he can just decline and go like, "Hey, fuck, I was going for Soul, or I was going for whatever," and be like, everybody knows where my vote went. So he had great concepts, but he just lacked the art of subtlety.
Do you agree, Marian? As a chaos sower, what went wrong there?
100% I agree. Like people need to learn, and I think a lesson for anyone that, my advice to anyone that ever wants to play survival, sometimes it's more about the smarter moves than the bigger moves. Yeah. And I think, again, I say Rome came into this game with like a preconceived perception of how he wants to be seen and like the legacy he wants to leave on the game, and that's great. But the best game you're going to play is when you're being your authentic self. And also, I think I agree with Dino. He lacked when it came to subtlety, but also he lacked self-awareness.
Oh, yeah.
If you think that 13 people are voting with you and are writing the name down that you are giving them, that's a red flag, because that very rarely happens in Survivor.
It's a little easy.
It's too easy. And if it's too easy and it's too good to be true, trust me, it's too good to be true. So
on the flip side, though, ironically, then it became very easy on the other way, because then it became
easy.
A very
no
easy.
No could be that easy, and then like every person is like,
It's
true. It was happening on the other, but it was only happening with such ease on the other side because of the uniqueness of exactly who Rome is, which again I think is unprecedented. Like, and he thinks Soul is that person, but it was him. Like, I do think that the Sam vote that he throws out was so emblematic of like the Rome game. Like, it personified everything so perfectly. It was so chaotic and antisocial and unnecessary. It was doing the most again, based on completely the wrong read, where he's gotten so many votes out there. It's so unanimous for him that his vote doesn't matter, when all the votes pretty much technically are coming on to him. Like, that just perfectly summed it up. And this is from someone who had a secret scene where he's like, I just want to chill at the merge and go with the flow and be shown as a laid back guy. So I think that that lack of self-awareness to me is the issue. I think it's very hard to play Survivor without the basis of game and self-awareness that I think that Rome really lacked. Going into exit interviews that I find, like, you need to have with like a dollop of salt, because they're in contrast to everything we've seen. They're in contrast to everything, like, with like Kishan's exit interview where he's like, we were 4 good to go. It's like Kishan's like, we were always taking out Rome. Even now his sense of reality seems very divorced from the kind of snippets that we're getting from kind of all of, the episode and the other exits and stuff. And I think that is really hard. Like, I do think with someone like Rome, I think the way he approached the game, and whether that's who he is or how he wanted to play in this way where, there is like looming Survivor 50, people do want to make an impact. He does seem like he wants to bring the entertainment. And as a TV character, we shouldn't criticize that. But I do think like what's actually impressive was that this didn't happen at the first tribal council. And to his credit, he did some good things that made him not the immediate target. He found the idol. He had it you know, strictly for the first tribe when he showed that and he had it as like a really relevant, secure shield. He had Genevieve for long enough that it feels like Genevieve now, and we can talk about it, maybe wrongly went out on wrongly went on a limb to save him. And that was building off, I think, a pretty low basis point that Rome came in on. But by the time he got here, you know, everything came home to roost. He didn't have one person of 12 to tip him off to use a shot in the dark. Not one leak, not one person willing to stand up for him. Even like remotely, not even someone who I think is in confessional. Like, I don't want to put myself out there, but if I could, every single social decision he had made came back to this point. So, and I think that, yeah, he had done some good stuff to kind of avoid that tool now, but also I think we kind of saw all of that, you know, avalanche come down on him in this episode. Any more on Rome? Do we have more on Rome? Or,
no. So
Rome and
it comes
Carl?
down to, you're going to love this one. It comes down to talk less, smile more, don't let them know what you're against, what you're for, right?
Yes.
It's very much that. If you
I've
just took a moment to if you just took a moment to chill and actually observe instead of just trying to drive his own agenda, he would have gotten so much more information that he could then make educated and informed decisions on. Instead, he was so hell-bent on driving his agenda that he missed any sort of social cues, missed the pockets of information that he could have had. And I'll go into, like, you know, there's been the Sol versus Rome thing this entire game, and, you know, just completely, like, it's almost rabbit in the hare-esque, you know, with Sol versus Rome, where Sol has kind of been taking this slow game, like slow and easy, taking chill, happy days, finding the information, having very casual, subtle conversations. He's this really genuine. He comes across as super authentic, which I think he genuinely is. He's patient. He just takes the time to listen, and then he responds, and people trust that. And then in exchange, he gets information, you know, like, for example, his I made a note here where you know, the whole Tiana, Carl has thrown your name out as a major threat, and Sol says, hey, Tiana, you know, Carl's not going to admit that to you, let me go have a chat with him. There's a couple of things that's great about that. Is, yes, it's true, Tiana's not going to get anything out of it of value. Sol gives himself an opportunity to go build a relationship with somebody. He's seen as doing something with Tiana. He gets an opportunity to go like, hey, Carl, this is what's out there, you know, build that relationship. But at the same time, Sol's got his own bias about Rome, so he can taint Rome if he needed to, which I don't think he needed to. He could drive the story on both sides to Tiana and Carl very subtly if he needed to direct it, which like I say, Rome did that on his own. But also in that moment, Carl gets heated up and instantly gives him valuable information in the game. Oh, do you know I don't have a vote? Now Sol has one bit of information more than he had before. And that's it's amazing. And that's why I say, like, the games are so opposite. So if you just take a moment to, like, understand, like, what are people's needs? What do they need? And you start going like, well, what does that player need? Let me be that for them. Let me help them achieve that, because then I'm of value to them. And yeah, I'm going to get something out of it as well, you know?
Wait. Rome is Hamilton. Sol is Burr. Why do you play like you're running out of time, but Sol's willing to wait for it? I cannot unsee it. I will go through the whole musical. It makes sense. It's so perfect, you know, like it's killing me. It's just so perfect, and I am obsessed with it. And as a Burr fan, like, I'm rooting for Sol, and I think that is excellent. Yeah, Marian, what do you think about how Sol was kind of doing here? He got the win. How are you feeling about Sol / Burr?
I honestly, this episode, I think Sol was my favorite. His conversation that he had with I think it's Tiana and Andy at some point. Tiana goes like, he's throwing you know, Carl's throwing my name out there, and Sol's literally just like cleaning his teeth, and he's like, yo, don't believe anything that Rome says, because this is how he plays the game. And that's the subtlety, like the art of subtlety, that it was so effortless. You know, he was cleaning his teeth, but just him saying that at the right moment, like, now he's got a bond with, like, Tiana and Andy, and now Tiana and Andy are going to spread the fact that, like, yo, don't trust Rome, this is how he plays the game. So, like, all the love to Sol for this episode. I felt so bad for him, and I literally just, like, wanted to jump through the screen in the episode when Rome was following him, because it was so like cringe to see, and like had Rome done that to me, I'd have probably punched him. But I felt so sorry for him, because like there's one thing having a boss and Rob system, it's another thing if like you don't even get like 2 seconds to yourself.
I don't think people loved it when Boston Rob was doing it either, Marian. I don't know how to tell you that, but
I know, but you know,
Marian loved it. Shannon, Marian loved it.
You out there with Boston Rob. I feel like you might have Boston Rob goggles where you're like, people loved it when he did it. It's like, no, I don't think anyone really likes like this. It won, everyone but it won by fear and kind of like oppression rather than by like, you know,
it was a dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly. Look, the system worked, but Marian, I don't think the people were like.
I'm very unbiased, except when it comes to Rob, and people know this. Come on now, Boston Rob, just not any Rob, Boston Rob.
Yeah, it's not the other Rob that is the name of the podcast. Yes,
but yeah, like guys, okay, this is not a podcast about how much Marian loves Boston Rob, but
it feels like it is. It really has been a major theme.
Okay, I'm not going to mention his name again.
Yeah, I think
like, just man props to Saul, because you know, things like that, like it doesn't take much on Survivor to just like devastate you and deplete you, and sometimes you really just need that time out alone on the beach for like 2 minutes to like get yourself together. But like Rome wasn't even affording him that, so my heart really melted for him in the previous episode. But I think he did so well in this episode, and I'm just like, I'm loving his subtlety. I'm loving the fact that he's creating all this bonds so effortlessly, and you know, whether people see him as a number or whatever, like I don't think Saul's gonna leave us anytime soon.
Well, yeah,
I hope not.
Yeah.
So to add to that, like we talk about feeling depleted. So in the ordinary course, it's tough to bite your lip sometimes, you know. And I really appreciate when a player who already, we know people are deprived at a rapid rate. So you're already tired, you're already hungry, you're going to be the worst version of yourself in this game, yet Saul can still like keep his pride in his pocket, not react, keep his cool. He's got this objective in mind. He says, well, what is the goal here? The goal isn't to beat Rome here and now, and let me just lay down the rule and let this youngster talk to me like this and put him in his place, or, you know, and which in the ordinary course he'd probably, you know, have taken a different approach. But he's like, well, this is a game, this is the impact. He maps everything out, so he's not reactive. He doesn't seem to be reactive at all. He's quite cool, calm, and thoughtful with his approach, and it's really not an easy environment to be those things in. So it speaks a lot to his character, and it's a great skill and a very valuable skill in this game that I hope takes him far. What I do worry about is sometimes that can be seen as quite passive, and that might be a hard thing to articulate at the end of the game. But I mean, shit, that's only a problem if you get to the end of the game, and you need to just get there to the end to be able to pitch your case. So he's giving himself the best opportunity to go deeper, you know, and you can cross that bridge when you get there. I just want to say something, Marian. You feel like all anxious to come on the podcast. At least you didn't say rabbit versus the hare instead of tortoise versus the hare. So I've really stuffed up.
And I said that's such a good point.
They're both fast. They're both great.
That sounds like an interesting. I mean, that's just a race, the rabbit versus the hare. I said it was everyone. It's fine. Brain typers are a big part of life and podcasting. But look, I you know what I really liked about Saul in this episode? Other than, like, yes, he pushed it on Rome. He got the win. Rome makes himself an easy target, but, like, Saul in his subtle way, like, you know, fully buried him, and I thought that was great. But even more than that, Saul was Rome's target and so well insulated to the point where, like, at the feast, before they know who Rome is throwing out now that Carl, you know, is not a possible name. Yeah, okay, at that point, maybe Sue's worried about Gabe. Tiana threw out Gabe. Sam's been a target. You don't want it to be yourself. Like, at that point, maybe you throw out Andy, and maybe that name does just take hold. But here's what impressed me. There were 2 votes on Andy. Why does anyone care enough to even create this divide? Just let Rome vote for Saul. No one could possibly be mad, right? No. Or even then, just let Saul vote for Andy then. Let him be the split. Let him protect himself. But they put 2 votes onto Andy. Sue puts a vote onto Andy, and I don't know how to really blame Sue for that. We see Sue put the name out of of Andy. We see Sue vote for Andy. It's possible someone else put out the name. It's possible that the group just said, hey, you're the other Andy, vote. But Sue's the one who does that. And I just think that shows a real insulation for Sol. And Sam even goes to Sol and is like, oh, well, I would want to keep you. They're really trying to protect him. And maybe there's a sense of like Rome is chaotic. He doesn't even end up voting for Sol. So like, who knows what he'll do. But like the high odds are Rome is going to get blindsided. And the fact that they care enough to like really follow through with a 2-vote split for me is quite extreme. And I want to talk through whether they should have even done that. But I do think it speaks to how much people care to, it seems, other than the chaos of Rome, possibly insulate Sol, who was someone they just met. And they shouldn't really care that much about if it bounces back onto Sol, which is incredibly unlikely in and of itself.
It speaks volumes. This doesn't say like, it's one thing. It goes, this is a main target. You should be fine to, well, this is our main target, but we want to work with you.
Yeah.
You are important to our game, so we need you here. It's like generally collateral damage. Oh, well, it's collateral damage. Well, geez, too bad. You know, if you go, you go. But this is saying like, we actually can't afford for that because you fit somewhere in our plans. We like you. It might not even be that you fit in plans. They just like you. See you as more valuable. And they're like, well, let's piss somebody else off, especially when it's like you say, Sol could have just taken the 1 and the 1. And there would have been a split and then a potential revote.
Or if he's played his shot in the dark, then Sol's vote is enough. Like Sol's 1 vote is probably fine.
It's probably fine. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so they go out of their way to actually protect him. And we see there is going to be blowback for that because in the preview to next episode. That was the risk they were willing to kind of take, you know. So it's a great showing of the social game so far.
That's interesting to me because, if Sol just votes for Andy, then, you know, Sol obviously is going to try to protect himself. And then that becomes a very individual thing. And it's like for Andy, you could have done that too. You know, you could be scared that he's voting for you or that, you know, Sol might throw a name out. Like you can always throw out, everyone can do a 1-vote individual split. And if that's what Sol wants to speak to, you know, then it would be hard for Andy to be mad at the group. And it would be very much between like Sol and Andy, like individual, just like, you know, self-preservation. But to go out of their way to put 2 votes when firstly, it would mean that Rome has to wise up to the 12-person blindside that is currently happening where he thinks he's controlling the vote, you're probably fine. Then he has to have something. Now they know that he played something and is someone who can find something, but he has less time to find it because he's already played something. Or he has to play his shot in the dark and hit it. At that point, anyway, there would be 0 votes. So maybe he has to have an ally. Clearly, everyone's against him. One ally who's voting with him. It was so likely that Rome was going home, and they still cared to put 2 votes. Like, is it the chaos of thinking Rome has an extra vote? Is it trying to be too conservative with the fear of all of these new era things? Maybe. But again, for like Sol probably also getting the backlash of that, the fact that they went out so far on a limb for Andy, like, again, I think it speaks to Sol's relationship and possibly just some like fear and being like ultra conservative around it. And I don't think that I back it for the group. I think I would have just been like, Sol, that's your 1 name. So I think that good for Sol. And I like for someone like Sue, who we saw throw it out, I see that as a negative.
So, I mean, seeing as we're still, you know, talking about this vote, going into a vote like this stage of the game, I think most people want to be low-key. You don't want to draw lines too early. You've just met your other tribe mates. You're ascertaining, like you know where you think you know where your position in your original tribe is. You want to kind of figure out where you slot into other tribes. You're trying to figure out where people slot in with each other. So you don't want to have to draw a line and piss the wrong person off, right? So Rome's done the majority a massive favor. So this idea that we had earlier, we were talking about, like, do you keep Rome on for longer? Do you get rid of him now? He's done them a massive favor by giving them like a very obvious target. The only blowback being this Andy, these 2 votes Andy. I think if it's 1 vote Andy, you know, very different, very, very different kind of blowback. Because you could put that onto the Rome, or you could put it onto whoever. But the question I have here is that, you know, we've now gotten to this, you know, 12 or 13 person vote, and in previous seasons we've had this split where 13 people vote but for only 6. So do we prefer this as a mechanic to what it was in prior seasons? Do we prefer this change where, you know, you've got the one individual meaning necklace and everybody else is fair game?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I want to talk that through it, but I'm just thinking like, yeah, the way that this blows back for Saul having one vote on him is like Rome has an idol and wises up and has an extra vote, and now Saul's gone home. Like, so Saul would be robbed, or it has one ally, which is even less likely, I think. Like, and that's how much they cared to put on, or maybe just wasn't an optimal split. And in that case, like, I should criticize it. I don't like when splits aren't optimal. But yeah, Marian, what did you think about and I want to talk more about the split vote because I think it's fascinating the whole way this went. But yeah, what about this new twist? Now, I'm gonna blow your mind. Like, we're 24 years into Survivor, so we're gonna have to keep it very, very innovative, original. The twist was they're gonna do a challenge as groups, and then one group will win food, and then they'll compete individually, and then one person will earn the merge of having immunity. Now, it's bold, it's new. It's not just a reward and immunity challenge, because that would just be where we started 24 years ago, which I like. So yes, it was different, but it was also the same. So how did you feel about the fact that they went back to their roots, Marian, with this twist of playing 2 challenges for reward and immunity?
Yeah. So if anyone knows me, they know that like I am old school to the bone, to my core. And I'm sorry, but like earning the merge, like I still can't wrap my head around it. Like I've grafted for like half the game. I've did things to keep myself in the game. I should just be given the merge. Like I earned it, you know? So honestly, like I don't like the earn the merge thing. And you know, people might come for me for saying this, but I think merge should just
be merge. No one likes that. No one's
like
been into
it. Just like Jeff, stop. Yeah, I don't like it, to be honest. I guess I like the fact that only one person was safe, so it opens up, you know,
having a
more dynamic. I like that, but I mean, if we could go back to old school days and just, you know, whatever day it is, whether it's day 11 or day 20, and we're merging, you know, we've merged. Like, imagine we merged, Dino, after like doing everything that we've done. Like, we were through the trenches, and Nico comes and says, like, you need to earn the merge.
But isn't just winning immunity and then making it through the vote earning the merge? Like, isn't every round you don't get voted out earning the next round of
100%?
It's a glorified, you know, merge pre-Jura boot, you know, where it's, I mean, that's the only difference is you just don't get a buff, which is pretty shit. You've got this, you guys have merged.
Sell those on eBay.
You're all together. You're all together for a vote. Some would say, you know, like you've merged for a vote. So it's like,
some might say
I'd prefer. Yeah, I'd still prefer that you go from 3 tribes to 2 tribes. You've got a pre-merge swap. And no in the merge. I think that's
one day they'll do it, but they'll call it something else. Something completely different that we can't even conceive, and it'll be a whole new twist. But then
I can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it's interesting because Jeff apparently on the On Fire podcast was saying how he thinks with these big votes, they tend to be conservative. And it seems like that's why he's been doing mergatory and keeping the tribes half immune all this time. And now with these big votes, it was conservative. But I do think, firstly, Rome, like, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Like, everything Rome is doing, a lot of that speaks to who Rome is. But I do think that if there are 2 kind of factors of why this otherwise might have been conservative in approach, and people don't want to like ruffle feathers, I do think, firstly, they were expecting mergatory. So at the point where Rome's name even goes out there and all of this is happening, or even when they're thinking about it at the individual tribes, they're thinking who's on the bottom that we can really cut if we need to. They already have those names in mind, expecting half the people to be immune and expecting, like, you know, people to be pushed under the bus when options are limited at mergatory. And I think the bigger thing is, especially because in old US Survivor, Steven spoke about this, and in Australian Survivor still to this day, you know, in international Survivor, when there are big tribes, it's not necessarily boring. You know, we had an very interesting 13-person vote this year in Titans v Rebels. Like, sometimes it's a little big consensus, it's a lot of people. Sometimes it's big structured tribes. But I think that going from a small tribe, a very, very small tribe, when the maximum you've voted for is 6 at most, and probably they've lost votes and it's all really small and finicky, to this many votes probably is overwhelming. And that probably does, you know, especially if you've only been to 1 or 2 tribal councils max, like, yeah, at that point, maybe you do want to just kind of like learn the game a little bit and like learn this. That's a lot to corral. Whereas if you've come from a 12-person in Australian Survivor or 10-person pre-merge tribe, like by the time you got to the merge, you're like, I'm used to these numbers. Let me like put numbers together. Heroes versus Villains last year, they had the Vigilantes. It was big structural groups. Like we've definitely had big tribes. We do it in the pre-merge too, but we have big tribes that do actually like, you know, make a stand and do draw lines. But I think it's hard to do that from 6, especially when you're expecting / having mergatory. So I think that's the thing more for me. Does that make sense? Or why do you think, Dino, that it, you know, it would be conservative? Or is it just Rome? It was
what I think it can lead earlier on to a bit of conservative voting. I don't disagree with that, right? And if you look at it episodically, it's like, oh, you don't want necessarily a conservative vote. But one, that is still very hard to pull off. 2, as we see now, it doesn't take a ton of votes to create a bit of chaos, you know, and this vote proves it. I mean, there were only really 2 stray votes, technically. 2 out of 13 is not a lot, but it's enough. And also, I think that every conservative vote that does happen with these bigger tribes, it just builds up energy. It's almost like stretching an elastic band a little further and a little further, a little further. It's going to reach breaking points, and it's going to be like, okay, cool. Who's gonna pull the trigger first? And when they do, it's going to be an absolute explosion because there's been this whole built-up energy. And then all bets are off. Nothing's ever going to be the same again, and there won't be another conservative vote again, you know, because people will be too scared because they've been through it. So I don't necessarily disagree that big tribes initially lead to like conservative voting, but I definitely think it builds up for far more interesting gameplay a little bit further down the line at the very least.
It is interesting hearing Jeff talk about it because it's like, okay, I can see why you think you should be doing mergatory because you think that these big votes are conservative. But again, you're trying to like create an outcome over like faulty information that is just going to, you know, Survivor is so subjective and so layered and so multifaceted that it could go any which way. There are extremes of production that will tend to away, but even as we've seen, like, oh, I'm going to protect the big players by having a final 3 and then fire. And it's like people just now are voting at the final 5. Like people will work around twists, especially when they're incredibly predictable, as like the fact that they all knew that the merge was coming the next day and then it did. Like that kind of predictability of like what people might feed into and having those thoughts, that's more of an issue, I think, than any like one specific, well, like there are issues, but like one specific thing when you're like, we can't let them be conservative. We can't have so many people voting. We better narrow their options. But now there are so narrow options with so many votes that they're scared about it bouncing back on them. So now they're even more conservative, you know, like things will bounce around. Like I think that's why the purity of the game and just letting it play out tends to be the best thing to do and not just like relying on like this will definitely happen and we have to change it to the thing that I want. Because also, what if the thing that you want, as you're saying, isn't even right? What if it is conservative for a round and that makes everyone have like a false sense of security and then the final 11 vote is like the most like, you know, scary thing you've ever seen? Like I think that trying to control things remains to be the problem. But when we go to this, like the votes on Andy, which continue to fascinate me, I feel like this is one of the biggest strategic parts of an otherwise pretty passive episode. So we have what we see is Sue throwing out Andy, and maybe someone else did, and we didn't see it. We see Sue throwing out Andy, and then she goes to Sam. Well, she says to Sam and Sierra, who were there, the allies of Andy, how do you feel? And they're like, okay. And then Sam kind of builds on it with Soul. So Marian, what did you think about this as an ally? Do you think there was something else they could have done? Did you rate this? Because I know like Steven was very critical about like how Sam specifically handled this. I thought it was actually pretty good, but dicey. So how did you kind of feel about the split vote from Goddard?
I feel like when they were at, do we call it a merge feast with the since half of them?
Everything is just what it looks like to be. They merge and they're feasting. Words.
Okay. So, you know, I think it was very good of like Sam and Sierra from like just a game perspective and a strategy perspective when Sue throws Andy's name out to agree with it, even though they, you know, they weren't for it. You're not going to pick a fight. You're going to agree. But I'm a little bit scared for Sam in the next episode because, you know, Sam does tell Saul, write Andy's name down. And I guess from Sam's perspective, he's building a bond with Saul, you know, now he solidifies something with him. But I'm really scared that in the next episode, like Andy's going to have like a little freak out and be like, why did my name appear twice? And I fear that Saul might just be like, Sam told me to vote for you and now Andy wants to get out Sam. So honestly, Sam is doing so well and I just wish he would have told Saul, vote for Rome. And I get that everyone was scared, like, you know, does Rome have an idol or anything? But it's a good and a bad thing that Sam did. You know, he's solidifying something with Saul, but also like the blowback, especially knowing Andy from the first episode, like, you know, he potentially has the potential to have a meltdown or a blowout. So yeah, I'm very nervous for Sam, and Sam, I'm rooting for you. Please be here next week.
So what I find interesting is two things, and I want to break it into two parts. Is looking at Gada coming into this episode, and then just looking at the conversation and the people that were around that conversation when Andy's name was thrown out, right? So coming back from that tribal council, obviously now Rachel's been completely blindsided, and she's feeling very much on the bottom, which, you know, the vote would dictate that she is. I think she handles it incredibly well to go like, hey, look, you know, it's the game. I would have liked to have been looped in. I understand. It's cool.
Well, it's not just the game. It's Annika. I want to say no one's ever been more demonized than your poor best friend who just got sent to the pre-jury Ponderosa. Kishan, Annika were evil supervillains who held me against my will. They put guns in my head, okay? And I did not want to do it, Andy, but Annika is just awful. You don't even know. Anyway, I love that. It's such a running theme.
Yeah.
It sucks for those people so hard.
I will say to Dino's point, he said Rachel handled it so well when her bestie was voted out, because man, if they had to show how I handled Steffi's blindside, I am so glad that didn't.
I'm sure you were very
and they didn't have rice to cook there. They didn't get to eat their feelings, Marian. They didn't have like half a bag of rice to steal from the tribe.
Wait, didn't you say that Steffi was threatening you? And that if you didn't do what she wanted, she was going to come for your family? You didn't say that? Because I think that's
Marian,
running Discord.
No.
Marian straight up told us to get nutted, that we were idiots.
I lost my shit. So again, I agree with Dina. Like, Rachel handled it with so much poise. You know, the same way that Saul handled the Rome bullying, so much poise. And I actually watched like Rachel's reaction, and I'm like, man, if I should ever play again, like, I'm gonna have a little, you know.
I'm not gonna call people morons.
Oh,
you learn on the third time. Yeah.
I wished I called people morons. I'm forever grateful that, you know, it wasn't my finest moment.
They couldn't even air what you said. It was just
executive.
It was just beep down.
It was the start of Marian and Dino, so I guess it wasn't
Mariano. Yeah. Sorry,
Mariano.
Dino.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Sorry. Yes. Rachel handled it well, and she told them all what Annika had done to her.
Oh. There we go. And it's fair and it's fine. And she's, although she's probably seeing, I don't know where she genuinely sits on the Sierra thing. I think she'll still want, I think Sierra can repair that relationship. Sam, I don't think so. It depends on what happens. So I don't know that, right? But I think she's doing as well as she can with what she's got at the moment, right? And Gada as a whole is doing as well as they can with repairing those relationships, coming back from a trouble. Andy's coming in there feeling like, oh my word, this was amazing, you know. And it's from the edit side, I must say, from an editing point of view, this episode was super fun. Just the way they edited it, and you know, they dunked on Rome. They you know, so they really did, you know.
They dunked so much on Rome, like they were playing basketball, like how he says he plays basketball on Rome.
100%. And like, you know, even Andy, where it's like, oh my word, blindsides are awesome, and then he gets blindsided with his name coming out twice. Or, you know, Rome with the Sam votes, and Rome's face is like shock horror, and then like, and then Rome's name comes out, and then it's like the real Rome face came out.
Yeah, it was great. They were indistinguishable as well. He had a good fake shock face, because they really were very similar to the real shock face that we saw not 30 seconds later.
100%. So anyway, so the editing's been great, but yeah, so it's interesting. And the other thing I found super interesting was, you know, they've highlighted once or twice that Sam has voiced in his confessionals, I didn't want to show Andy this to break. I needed to maintain trust. Hopefully I can use this later down the line as a decoy, as a this, as a that. So that's come up a couple of times. So I suspect that comes into play. And at the beginning of the episode, you think, okay, cool, they're going to work together with something later on in the game. Whereas now I'm like, shit, they've shown us that he's excluded Andy. They've shown us Sam talking about using this later on in the game, and now there's this preview of Andy going, "God is dead to me." it's pretty cool, you know, what this could be shaping up to. So anyway, so that was the one dynamic to just chat a bit about Gata coming into this episode. And then also it's like, well, what do you do at the well, right? Or at the non-merge feast. The merge feast.
The reward.
The reward. Reward. So there you are with a couple of people. Andy, who previously had said, "Oh, I'm just going to go out there and tell everyone that I'm absolutely at the bottom." That's the information that's been spread. Here you are with an entire tribe, with this one person who's told you that they're at the bottom, and they're going, "Well, fuck, this guy's at the bottom. You know, what about him?" They might have discussed other names, and people weren't willing to budge because now you've got 2 and 2. Which one do you pick back there? Now you're showing favoritism. If you're defending the one person and not the other person, so it's like. That's giving away information. So if you just take them both off the table and put it onto where there's only one option, like, you know, perhaps there was a bit of a horse trade going on and they went with the path of least resistance. So that kind of ties back into, you know, me just thinking about how Andy positioned himself and now he's falling victim to his own strategy, which wasn't a bad strategy. It's just happened to not work in this instance. So yeah, I just wanted to tie those two things together for a bit of my own context. I don't know.
Well, I think that with did you just say sorry to me? Please, you know, stop apologizing for nothing. Sorry that I gave a point.
We're 55 minutes in, and is it only my
I'm
second
sure
sorry?
It's not.
Yay!
No, I'm sure you've.
It is his first sorry.
I just tuned it out at this point, but that one stuck out for some reason. I do think that for Sam, like, I actually rate how he handled this. Preview aside on how that's going to go, and you can't trust the previews. I think, like, for me, at the point where he's been thrown out and we see Sue throwing out Andy, you cannot go to bat for Andy. Like, we saw Sega go to bat for, like, Mariah. If you're just going to bat to him as a decoy, how close a gotta? You know, like, they won't even part with him when the odds of Andy going home are incredibly low. Again, it is based on Rome having the things he need and the wherewithal, incredibly unlikely, to not be blindsided here. Like, Rome is out the door, okay? The edit knows it. We know it. Like, you can't even pretend to anyone that that's not happening. So the odds of it even bouncing back on that second person, as we're saying, as it would have even been for a soul, is very low. So throwing out Andy, he should be okay. But if Goddard won't even allow that to happen, now he's Mariah. Now they're Sega. Now they're too close. Now the threat that Sam and Sierra have had on them is elevated further. When there has been a narrative, as you said, that Andy has put out there, that he's on the bottom, at that point, yes, you might start to be the decoy. Marianne had this. She was at the bottom in 42, and she built slowly through that and got into a good space, and she was protected by her 2 crew members. It's kind of like a similar thing that Andy has had, and she got to build to that point without really putting herself out there and showing how close those relationships were. I think that Sam was right to be like, okay, and knowing Andy probably won't go. However, I do think now you manage it. And Kevin Jacobs had a great article in the confessional this week, which is basically like, it's all how you manage it. Sam needs to go to Andy and say basically what I just did. The odds of you going home, incredibly low. It is a narrative we've put out together. I couldn't tell you at the time because you would freak out, and I didn't want to do that to you, but I felt pretty good that we could blindside Rome, who thought that he was completely controlling the vote. So yes, I did that. And now we're even more covered, and we're going to strike when they least expect it. He has to go to him immediately and show that. Even the conversation with Sol, I think he could almost have his cake and eat it too, because the name had already been put out there. It's a he said, Sol's word against Sam's, that Sam's saying, like, I want, you know, to work with you over Andy. I think that's, you know, all fine for me. And I think if anything, if you try to protect Andy at the merge feast, then he could become the real target, you know, then that actually becomes more pressing than Rome, who's completely by himself. So I thought that was fine. My biggest concern is the idol that Rachel knows at least something about that he was looking for it. I guess that he had it. I'm not super sure what she knew, but I know she knows more than Andy did. And she has a reason to out it, and she could use it against Sam. That's my biggest verifiable information against what Sam is doing. But I actually thought handling his name being thrown out wasn't the worst thing for me personally. What do you think, Marian?
Again, I spoke about it earlier on. You know, I think it, and again, Dino mentioned it. It's all gonna have to do with the way that he manages this. You know, so he tells Sol to write down Andy's name. Great, I'm forming a bond with Andy. I'm forming a bond with Sol. I know Andy's not going home. And I think just watching Sam, you know, in the first 6 episodes, I think he'd be able to come back and manage it and you know, solidify his bond with Andy. And it actually brings me back to like on myself and Dino's season with the Steffi vote. Dino managed that so well compared to like everyone else that came to me. And again, like people underestimate management.
It's very important. Yeah.
You underestimate like the power of management. So again, Sam, you better be here. Like at this point, he's my winner pick, and like you know, I'm here for you. So I'm hoping that he's gonna come back and just handle it really well, and that I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? You have to put it on Sue. Sue's the one who puts the name down as well without self-preservation for Sol, who I know they bonded over being in their 40s, but like she did just meet him yesterday. And yeah, I would just do that and be like, they asked me at the feast, and did you want to be Mariah or do you want to be Venus? Because Venus made it pretty far in the game and could have made it further if she didn't like trip over her own feet. So it behooves all of us that they think this narrative at a tiny, tiny risk to you, which unfortunately had to take, it was such a small risk. We're now all in a better spot. I think that has to be explained. But I'd love to talk about Sue because I feel like Sue is doing so much. She continues to be Lady Macbeth, the outdam spot plot line, the outdam spot plot, the outdam plot line. No, it doesn't work. It's fine. But that's how I always think about it when this paint comes back. And the really concerning thing is it was like in a secret scene last week, Gabe is looking for the idol. He says no one's found it. I'm like, oh, so she didn't tell Gabe. She didn't tell Caroline. Like, to me, that would be kind of a little bit to the way I have wanted people to play in a kind of a social way. Like, that would be kind of bad for me if she hadn't been already caught out with the paint saying she bit her tongue a couple of weeks ago. But considering she was caught out, not telling her allies is unforgivable to me. And, like, maybe she's working with Caroline because Caroline's the best ally of all time who will see this and be okay with it and cover for her. And she can read that and she knows she's got a great relationship and she has fostered that relationship and good for her. But there has to be some danger there. So I don't know, Dino, how are you feeling about Sue and everything that she's doing with the paint and everything that's going on with Sue?
Again, I think incredibly difficult one to manage. Sue had two options when she was caught red-handed to, you know, just be like, hey guys, the two of you, I have found something. Please keep it a secret. But she really didn't have trust in Tiana. So
no, but can't you tell Caroline after?
But telling Caroline, yes, agreed with you there, and then that person can try help you cover tracks and you know, mitigate any sort of blowback. Right now, you get the situation where everybody's finding it, and again, I love the edit, just the zoom in on her face of like concern of like
it was a great edit. Her life flashed before her eyes, and it was incredibly clear on her face.
All 45 years of her life flashed before her eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's all going to come down to Tiana. So I was more interested, and I made a note of here and going like, I think Caroline handles this probably the best, in the sense that she could very well go and run amok with this information to try buy favor with a whole lot of people she doesn't know, right? But then everybody has that information, everybody benefits from it, and then she loses somebody that she's got a close relationship with, right? She might elevate herself for like 3.5 seconds in the game, but she loses it. Now she's going like, hey Caroline, hey Sue, I know you've got this, we're good, I'm happy for you, don't even stress. Which is the right, in my mind, which is the right thing to do, knowing that if it does come out, well, Tiana's the one that's spread it. It's never going to look, it's never going to look like Caroline spread that information, not for a second. We know Sue's already suspicious, right? Not of Caroline. So Caroline sees all sorts of upsides. So I think her play here was great. I think Sue is going to be outed, and I think that idol's going to get flashed relatively early on, come actual merge, real merge.
It is the merge. Sue's, you know, in the Rome school of doing too much, I feel. But I think for Caroline, like, you know, she doesn't have to not trust Sue, even though Sue did this very weird thing. I think she could be like, Sue's a little weird, you know, like, I don't think that it makes Sue, I think, like, it doesn't make Sue a bad ally to her. I think that Sue is a good ally to her, and she could read into it like, wow, can I even trust Sue? Maybe I should use this against her. But I think she's invested so much in that relationship, and it is a mostly good relationship. And while this is a very strange mistake for Sue to make, to not tell her, I think it speaks more to just kind of like the strangeness that she might have to work around and mitigate in having Sue as an ally, but I don't think it speaks to like Sue's loyalty for her and a genuine relationship that is important. So she does kind of at that point have to vouch for her, but I also think Sue gets lucky and fostered the relationship well, but gets lucky that Caroline will handle that with such grace and still put it first, even though it does have some red flags as an alliance member, that they could play like this and not tell you about all of these things, even when you caught them red-tongued. So that I think is strange. Marian, how do you feel about, Sue? She's lied about her age. She's lied about her job. She's lied about the paint. She's lying about the idol. She threw out the name that we saw. Sue's doing a lot. How do you feel about everything?
She's doing a lot.
Yeah.
I must say, I really like Sue. I also like the fact that when she found the idol, she didn't, run and tell everyone, because that seems to be like the new theme. You find something and you run and you tell everyone. It's not a tribe idol. If I find the idol, I'm not gonna tell anyone unless I need it as leverage. So I don't generally think that Sue made the biggest mistake. Obviously, she was caught red-handed. So at that point,
at that point, it's a bit of a tribe idol. Like at that point, maybe,
or maybe at that point, just confide in Caroline.
Yeah,
and just be like, I did find this. I don't trust Tiana. And lock it in. But again, I think Sue's very lucky that, Caroline figures it out and she goes to and she's like, I'm happy for you, good. So I'm hoping that Caroline is not going to out Sue, and I'm hoping that Tiana is just going to like forget about it. Probably not.
She probably won't, because it was a
weird,
very long-term storyline involving red paint and now pottery. Like, that's the kind of thing I think you think about when, like, that's not I want to get rid of.
And just like in an alternate universe, like Tiana forgets about it. Sue's protected. I look like Sue when I'm 57 because she really does look good for her age.
That woman is 45, Marian. Okay, so that's actually insulting about what you said about it being.
If you think about it, Letitia and Sue.
About real life now.
Letitia and Sue played at around the same age, so I would. I'm going to stop there.
They both needed the loved ones visit, because we don't know how much time each of them have left.
How much time?
As Carl says, if the good Lord wills it, or whatever he said, there'll be much time for a 45-year-old, which is a strange thing to say to a 45-year-old. Anyway, it's fine. Sorry,
do you think? Sorry, I just had a thought now after praising Caroline.
I'm so sorry that I said sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's contagious. No, I'm sorry that you're sorry that I'm sorry. Like, don't even. It's fine.
Guys, it's
we know what our lives
is.
So there's a potential risk, and I don't know if you'd agree here, that I'm just thinking of for Caroline. We've seen them come up as Sue and Caroline. They've got this relationship.
That is bad.
So now, if people think that Sue has something, they would assume Caroline. They'd assume Caroline knows something, and Caroline becomes a potential target to split them up and flush something out. So it's not all well and dandy for Caroline. It's not all
that
upside.
Is true. It's a good point.
I think she's handling it well, but I think Sue's now. There's an inherent risk that's kind of going over onto Caroline potentially.
Yes, I think that the risk is she's tied herself to a player who I praised a lot at the beginning, and now I'm increasingly concerned about. She's just doing a lot, and you're right that the same way that Genevieve was worried about Rome, Sue is doing a lot. Then I'm not calling her Rome. It's not to that extent.
No, for sure.
It could bounce back, and you 100% can be collateral to that. And I think that's my concern for Caroline. It's not. Like, you've invested in Sue. You are covering for Sue. And it's not about each of those individual decisions. It's just by, like, now that you're learning that this is the kind of player that Sue is, like, don't you have alarm bells about how that might impact her and then you by association, considering it's such a close association? And I do think that is something she probably will have to worry about.
And so if you cross your mind, so it's happened with Sue and potentially, Caroline, and then Rome and Genevieve, right?
Yes.
There's been this eventual risk that your ally brings onto you. And then we go back to Rachel, the way, Andy kind of reached out, and Rachel wasn't too keen to like build a full-on alliance with this guy. And it goes like, well, does it validate Rachel's decision at that point? Because this is the potential outcome of playing with somebody who's incredibly sloppy or messy, or not calling them all sloppy and messy, but I'm just saying, like, in a different way, Andy could have brought immense risk to any one of his like really close allies game. So does it like kind of bring validation to that? Because absolutely, like, who you align with you're not just in alliance based on trust. You're there based on perception, and whatever we do, and we both got to like pay the price for it at some point.
I completely agree with you. I just think that there are options beyond just like reject someone, and I don't know how much Rachel knew that Andy felt rejected, and like go all in on someone like Genevieve did with Rome, which we can talk about, like Caroline has done with Sue. Like, it's unfortunate for Rachel that it didn't get across the line to the point where Andy then goes. Like, if he's not an option for you, then it's best that he's like out the door. I think that, Andy said in his like mid-game pre-merge interview with Dalton Ross that like he'd already gone to Sam saying we should work on something, and Sam and Sierra really vouched for him. So either not choosing to or not getting it done might be a bit of the issue at the point where that's a loose end, or at least like placating that person. There has to be some middle ground between like, rejecting someone and being all in on someone. I think that might be it. But I do think that might be, that could be an issue for Caroline down the road. Like for Sue, is that the other name voting, riding Andy unnecessarily, I think, here, being that second vote, and whether she's choosing to and really putting her hand up, whether it's being put on her. It's a divide that is unfortunate in a social game where that's possibly an option that's been cut out. She herself has been so anti-Kyle because he wrote her name down. Now she's written down the name of someone who is still in the game in Andy. So I just think there's some unnecessary divides that Sue is putting forward here. I would also love to talk about Kyle here. Interesting episode for Kyle. Kyle, who is the really trusting person. And to be honest, like, Kyle said a lot of the stuff that Rome said Kyle was saying, right? So just to go through that scene, because I watched it multiple times, because the way that Rome narrates it isn't true to what we're seeing. So I know we've touched on it, but I just want to like point out, Kyle does say Sam is the biggest threat. Rome takes that to Sam, and it's true. That's what's narrated to us. Rome says, what about Tiana? Kyle says, that's fair. I think it wouldn't have killed him to be like, no, Tiana's been like at the bottom. Like, we work really, well together. Like, we should bring her in, instead of being like, that's fair. But I don't know what else was said in that conversation. I think he could have vouched for Tiana, but from what we saw, he certainly did not throw her name out. From what we know of their relationship, it would seem strange for him to do that. So that's where we're at with it. Rome said that in confessional, he said that Kyle threw out Tiana. In exits, he is still saying Kyle threw out Tiana. Again, the exits, had to be had with side assault. And then he does say Caroline and Sue are very close mother-daughter relationship. He does say Caroline's really bad at challenges. Rome tells us he also said that they were bad socially. He goes to Sue and says they're very close. That's what Kyle said, and the challenge stuff and the social stuff. So at the point where Sue comes back to Kyle and is like, you said all the stuff, Kyle's like, I just said you had a mother-daughter relationship. That might be bad. Like, mothers and daughters often are close. So what do you think, Marian, about like how you sit with Kyle's episode here? Because I feel like he gave a lot with Rome to bury him, but then did very well in burying Rome on the bounce back. So how do you kind of feel about this conversation with Kyle, and then how it kind of all exploded from there?
So I have a note, and I said that Kyle handled Rome throwing him under the bus with so much grace, because, he could have exploded and, made a bigger fuss, but he handled it so well. And I think what was really great for him was at the merge feast, when they start talking about Rome, Kyle says, I don't like what he's doing to us. He doesn't say like, I don't like what Rome is doing to me. He goes like, I don't like what Rome is doing to us. So he makes everyone feel like Rome is attacking everyone, and he's like the poison in the tribe. And that word, me and us, I think made such a big difference.
That's great.
And again, it was so subtle, and that's like the art of subtlety that we love and we look for. And it's so sincere, because everyone wants to be included. Survivor's not a me game. It's an us game. So you always want to play up to that. And he did it in such a spectacular fashion. And I watched that and I was like, you go, boy. So I think like that moment at the feast, he really put the nail in Rome's coffin. And I think he did it in such an incredible way. And again, he's just got such a nice guy energy order. And I mean, I love to love him. Like I love Kyle.
What do you think, Dino?
So yeah, I've got huge praise for Kyle for this episode. Absolutely. I mean, Rome fishes for a name of big threat. He says Sam, cool, defendable. You could always give a different context to it. If we don't see the Sam blowback potentially or whatever, I don't recall. But you could be like,
it's kind of in a montage of Rome giving information and Sam's like the middle part of the sandwich, so we don't see him react to it.
But I mean, you could easily defend them and be like, "Oh, he asked me who do I think is going to be best challengers," and I said, "You." Sorry, like my bad. But something
also,
that
he's a known liar, and none of that is true.
So the thing about Carl though is that we know he's not the super fan of the game, right? And I think the players know he's not the super fan of the game, and he refers to himself. It's like everybody knows I'm the most honest idiot out here, so he's got that edge.
I love how Andy was like, "Yes."
Yes.
Everyone knows I'm a stupid dumbass, and Andy's like, I do think that is. And you are speaking my language. I agree with you.
So it's great to manage his own threat level, and his social game comes through, and he becomes like super believable. And like in the Caroline Sue thing, it's like, I do see you guys have a mother-daughter relationship. Like, he doesn't know the impact. Shame, you can't be mad at him. It wasn't malicious. The guy doesn't know the game. Like, he doesn't know that everybody's going to be out for us because we have a mother-daughter relationship, and that's the worst thing in the world that you can have in this game. He can play anything down like he does. The Tiana thing is interesting because Tiana says, "Oh, my gut said something was wrong. That is my ally." And I think when Rome throws Tiana's name out and he goes, "Oh, that's fair," he's doing a great thing of managing threat, not being seen as having a close ally.
Close to Tiana,
I don't think it's a bad thing that he goes like.
That is a good point.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. That he goes, "Yeah, that's fair. Let them lead the conversation, and you just agree with the opinion because it's their opinion, and that's fine." It's like, he threw your name out. I just didn't rebut it. What must I do? Go and like give him all my actual thoughts and go tell him how close you and I are and put a target on both of our backs. It ends well for neither of us. Now he's gonna, now you might get information I don't, and vice versa, because he doesn't think we're together. So I don't think he could have done much better in that situation, particularly with the character that he had. Now, if it was Sol, on the other hand, who's a believable guy, I mean, Sol wouldn't go around doing it, so not necessarily the way Rome's done, but like, then it's going to be harder to defend because now you've got two believable characters, and it's like, well, who's telling the truth? So, huge praise for Carl. I mean, he doesn't have a vote, he doesn't have like necessary power. He goes out and gets himself an immunity necklace, which I don't think he needs, but he keeps it off the table for his number one target, which is great. Without his vote, he's still well looped in. People are rallying to like protect him. They consulting him. They're not just making assumptions. They're actually asking him about the situation. He's able to defend it, and people are believing him. So that speaks to not just how he handled that situation, but to the relationships that he's built up and the perception that players have of him, and his awareness of the perception that players have of him, which I think speaks to like who he really actually is. He's just being himself, which is this really nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to criticize one thing from him in this episode, I think he was reading Rome wrong. Like, he was too trusting of Rome. Like, I think all of that is fine. And you're right. Like, you can kind of cover for Sam. Sam is a threat. Yeah, like, I think that did come through because even when he hears about it, he's like, we had a really good conversation. Like, what? And to his credit, to be fair to him, most people would think like, yeah, why would Rome go and turn it around on everyone about you when you had a positive conversation that you could build into a relationship and possibly an alliance? Like 9 people out of 10 wouldn't do that. But that 10th person is Rome. So maybe he was trying to build something really positively and socially, but he was reading Rome wrong. And Rome is a very difficult language to read, right? So that part is difficult. But I do think that there was a trustingness that he gave. As much as you can say, okay, like, he can cover for a lot of the information. Most of it is fine. He still gave him a concrete name in Sam. He did give a lot on Sue and Caroline, who he has been against. That stuff could have been used against him. And he's lucky that Rome is so untrustworthy. And maybe he knows parts of that and knows that he'd kind of win that he said. But he is lucky that Rome will take too much information and make all his information bad, like he did last week with Genevieve, like he's doing here. Because he could have taken, as we said before, Rome could have taken the one pathway to just go to Sue, who already has like a bee in her bonnet about Carl. And if Rome had played it better, he might have done that, and it might have gone badly for Carl, where Sue does have a confessional of like, now I want Carl out. So I think he just gave him a bit much. But then at the point where he hears about it, firstly, he has a relationship with Tiana where she's going to put the information in motion so he can get it back. He is going to win immunity. He is going to put the vote onto Rome really well. He is going to cover well. He's like, I'm the most honest guy out here. And he did lie, at least by omission, about the things that he said to Rome. So I think that he did pretty well in that. He ended up being believed. Like, he covered very well. But I do think he did give Rome some ammo, I think, without expecting Rome to play it how he did, and just like that lack of awareness was just a little bit of a bugbear for me.
But has Rome done him a huge favor? Because there was a bit of naivety, maybe surviving naivety in what he thought was just an open, honest conversation where you're building a relationship, you're building an alliance with somebody, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe he was a bit too forthcoming, but has Rome inadvertently taught Kyle a valuable lesson at a key part of the game? No, but where Kyle might start going like, okay, cool, this is what's happened. This is how information comes back and gets used against me. And then he's a bit more careful with who he says.
Not everything's just a nice chat.
Yeah. So like it could be, if Kyle uses in that way, it could be a valuable lesson that he hasn't had to pay the price for, that hopefully if he's an astute or becoming an astute player, he'll be able to use that lesson down the line and not fall into the same trap at a later stage in the game.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, and I hope it's just reading, because like Rome felt terrible about Kyle. Like Rome said in exits that Kyle said something beyond the game. We don't know what it was. I don't want to dismiss Rome's reality. I also like have to point out that again, like many things that Rome said in the exit interview were hard to verify against other things that we know. So we have to kind of like hear it, but then also like be having the salt. So it's tough, but yeah, Rome came away like wanting to bury Kyle, and Kyle came away being like, what a lovely conversation. That part is a little concerning for me. Maybe he'll just be a little bit more aware of how people might act erratic or against how he'd expect, and just be more prepared for it. And I think that would be good. So who have we not really spoken about? I'd love to kind of hear more about Rachel. Dino, you have the pre-game friendship with Rachel. Anything about like how Rachel is doing here?
Rachel is one of the most divine human beings you will ever meet.
Did you say that about everyone? It means nothing coming from you. I do like Rachel so much, and I don't disbelieve you. I'm just saying that it's completely irrelevant coming from you.
She really is, and she
you don't have a bad word to say about another human being.
Oh no, I do. I do.
I can think of maybe a couple.
Who? Do you want to tell us who?
No, it's fine. You don't have to do that.
Sorry, Marian, your mics are breaking up there. No, so Rachel...
Dino, there'd be a Dino-shaped hole through the door if he had to talk about it negatively.
No, so Rachel, oh no, she's awesome, right? And it shows how quickly she's made friends. I'm just saying outside of this, in terms of I'm sporting my outbluff.
I thought I'm like, what is that? You showed the buff, and I was like, that isn't the gutter buff. Gutter buff. I want to say that. What is that? What is that buff?
Those who don't know, but I mean, she makes friends very quickly. Well, before
what is that buff? That's from your
bluff.
Yeah. So what is it?
The
friendship group that you have,
the Survivor poker crew,
and he's also
that he referenced. Yes, the cult.
Yeah.
Don't come for us. We're like the mafia. No, I'm kidding. Don is the Dom.
So
Dom is the Don. No, anyway.
Yeah, I probably would believe it more from him.
Yeah. No. Anyway. No. So you can see, because she and Derek are just both like really down to earth, genuine humans, good friends, and you can see the way she builds relationships in the real world and how she approaches people, and she's got an incredible patience, and I think that's shown in the game. And she hasn't been this like standout character that's freaking run amok and got 1,000 confessionals, but sometimes playing a game that's good for the camera is not a good winning game. Oftentimes it's not, and your good players are able to fly a bit more under the radar. The downside is that not everything you do is shown. The reality is she got heavily blindsided in the previous week, right? Which is scary to watch, but as a friend, I'm glad she got that experience, but still got to, live to see another day, right? So it's cool. It's all a part of the Survivor experience. You've got to be blindsided at some part. If you weren't blindsided or part of blindsided, you even play Survivor kind of thing. So I think she's done really well to keep her head. She's done well in the challenges. Nobody's like seen her as weak, and I know going into the game that was one of her concerns, was just a bit of the physical side of things. She is absolutely, and I'm so proud of this, she has absolutely smashed puzzles along the way. Really? Dude, I'm like, and this puzzle socks make an appearance every now and again, and it makes my heart absolutely smile. So I'm like, I'm very, very proud. So overall, I've really loved watching her. I do worry for her position at this stage, because now it's unclear. And just for the record, I am unspoiled on the season, and purposely so. I want to be able to enjoy the season for what it's worth and sweat bullets the way you should. So I am a bit worried about her position coming into this now, where it's like, okay, cool, your closest ally is gone. That could be a blessing and a curse. the other people that you thought you were close with are closer with somebody else. That person is now potentially turning. There's shots being fired in the preview, in and amongst the tribe you're originally with. Where does she fit in? So there's a bit of a concern. I don't see her building, immense cross-tribal relationships yet, but that might still become. So yeah, I mean, she's had a journey, and I am somewhat concerned, but still optimistic. I think overall she's done really well. That's my 4-minute take. Sorry.
No, I love it. I mean, you are literally friends with her. We love the take. Marian, do you want to talk about, because I'd love to talk about like Rachel and Sierra, like kind of these God of women. I have a rant that I want to get to for Sierra. How do you feel about like their place in the game?
I think Rachel's in a pretty good place. I'm not worried about her. In the preview, we see maybe an all-woman alliance forming, but I think that Rachel, like Dino said, she's been very subtle. She hasn't made like these big elaborate moves, but again, like we all for the smarter moves. And I think Rachel's in a good position, and I don't see her going home anytime soon. And if she's smart, like form an all-girls alliance, if they can pull that off, that's great. Sierra, I'm not too sure if she would, break away from Sam just yet, or if ever. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that. Oh, sorry.
No. I just think like currently, I think like Rachel's a lot more safe than Sierra is.
Well, Sierra has the target. But I do want to talk about it with Sierra, because now that we're hearing like All Girls Alliance, I mean, look, the second they say All Girls Alliance, it will not work, right? And let's always check off All Girls Alliance. If they mention it in the first act, it'll be over by the third act. It's just a fact of life. But I want to talk about it because I am concerned, and I was on the post-game show right after the episode last week, so it hadn't manifested as much, although I should have known that it would. That Sierra was getting harassment and death threats and attacked, and even the people who weren't attacking her to her face, like the criticisms I was seeing on Twitter about like she voted out a woman, it's just my absolute pet peeve in life. And like, I'm sorry to do this a week late, but I just want to speak to it, especially seeing talk of an All Girls Alliance, because if it doesn't work out, whoever steps out of line, whatever woman doesn't do that, will get hated on by people. Got mad when I said it, but it's true, because I've had similar misogyny happening to me by largely men who wish to control and own women. And what it is it's when women don't do what men want, but you're still centering yourself. Like, how is it that you think feminism is attacking a woman for having agency in a game and bettering her own game? Or even if she doesn't, but she's still having that choice, right? And playing her own game. And I do think that often men, and it's particularly infuriating when men do it, seek to have ownership over women's agency and think that they're being a feminist by being like, you voted out a woman. And attacking and harassing her speaks for itself. But even just criticizing that as her being not a feminist or her being sexist, while you criticize a woman for not doing what you want, especially as a man, has just at this point progressed past leaf blowers as my number one pet peeve. If I went on Survivor and that was what I had to put in my bio, my pet peeves, it would just be number one. So I just want to say it before the Women's Alliance happens. It'd be great if it happens. And if one woman thinks she has a better alliance with Sam for Sierra, or she has a better option there, and even if that option isn't as good and we can criticize it from a game perspective, please do not come for her as a woman for making a choice, because the best way to be a feminist on Survivor, to empower women, is to be a woman playing well to get you to the win. That's feminism, to have choices and control. And I hate when people attack, of course, but even just criticize women on that basis. And that is the rant that I've just had in me for a week. I feel better. I feel a little.
Yay.
The crazy thing about it, she got death threats. She could only take it to a 2-2. Even at like worst, she was not even the swing vote. Like, Sam had the leverage with the idol in their relationship,
and then be at risk of going home anyway.
So like, even on that, it just shows how it has no logic, because Annika didn't even have a vote. And even again, if she had chosen on the 3-2, had been a pure swing, even then, obviously, I would have been tearing my hair out. But the fact that it even happened where she had to have taken Sam across, and he had the leverage, and people wanted to go to the 2-2. That's feminism, right? Risking rocks is feminism. That's what I've learned. So, okay. I'm sorry. I needed to. Yeah. And I'm apologizing as well. And I'm sorry for saying sorry.
No, it needed to be said. And fair play. The irony of, anyway.
Marian, you've got a lot of hate for being a woman on television.
I have.
Yeah.
You know, I think something that's been heavy on my heart, I think, for like the past, I don't know how many couple of years, is that like I hate like the toxicity that the Survivor fandom sometimes brings, and it's not all of them, but there's so much of them. And it's, again, you don't have to like everyone, but if you have nothing nice to say, it's just so much easier to shut up. Again, we're not saying be a fan of everybody. You know, you can hate me, but you can also not say anything about it, because at the end of the day, like, I'm a human being. See it as a human being. You know, we're not Survivor players. Like, we have our own lives. You know, we come back and we have our own reality and our own family. And I think, like, for me, there's nothing more like irritating and annoying and frustrating than like the toxicity within the fandom, and like how they will like personally attack you or give you death threats or like throw you under the bus. And I think this is also has a lot to do with me not wanting to come on podcast, because people are so mean. And me generally, like, I'm gonna call you out and I'm gonna say it. And like, if you're a toxic fan listening to this, just stop.
Well, they're not.
Like,
it's not actually. It's not these listeners. These listeners, unless you're hate listening.
Yeah, I know, but you know, the trolls. Believe me, the trolls are also here. They're everywhere. You know,
yeah, they do. They hate listen to this. It's so weird.
Yeah, they hate listen to it, but they listening to it. It's like, just stop. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. I mean, you're not gonna love everyone on a cast, but like, these are people with lives. You know, last season, I forget the name, someone also got death threats. You know,
everyone got, it was, I mean, they were kind of sending death threats to each other.
Yeah, there was one
Maria Gonzalez.
No, Maria, this year, just on this one very specific brand of hate and sexism, just on the one little tiny streamline of sexism was Caroline, Maria, women voting out another woman because it benefits their game, or they think it benefits their game, has happened so many times this year. I know it's boring and I know I'm a broken record. I've had this rant so many times, and yet I still feel the need to do it. And it's not even for our listeners, because I know that 99% who aren't hate listening are the good ones. But you should call people out. That's what I wanted to say. If you have the bandwidth to get into it with people, if you see a man especially being like, she hates women, she voted out a woman, tell them they're a misogynist. Tell them that they're not a feminist. That's important to me.
At the end of the day, whether you're a woman or a man, like you know, Dino voting out Phil, like, no one came for Dino. Me voting out Metal, everyone comes for me, you know? Like, you in Survivor, you need to do what's best for you. So if Sierra doesn't want to be part of, you know, an all-girls alliance, and she feels like going with Sam's going to be better for a game to
her number one ally, that'd be
a number one ally, then go for it. You know, again, if you're gonna, you know, my Survivor dream is just like, I need a Black Widow 2.0, a Black Widow Brigade 2.0. Like, I'm waiting for it. I've been waiting for it for almost 20 years. So, you know, that's my biggest dream in life. But if Sierra feels that to get to the end, she has to stick with the number one alliance, like, let her be.
Yeah, I think about this often in like the way that it's not just the Survivor fandom, in the way that internet hate is and manifests in all the fandoms. It's like, it's the worst it's ever been generally. Like, obviously there are like specific events, but like generally it's the worst it's ever been. And it's also the best it'll ever be. We're only going down a pathway of more toxicity as more people are online, as more people become uninhibited, as more people feel like they have access to these players and feel entitled to that. Like, I really just think it's like the graph is like, it's just devolving in a very straight line. And I do think, like, Dino and I were talking before the podcast truly about how great so many of the fans are. Like, I think that like the best thing you can do is just like be the light in the fandom and be like the light that drowns out a lot of the darkness, because there's so much hate and stuff. And I think just by being really positive and like going out of your way to be like nice to players, or, you know, if you see like, oh, I'm really upset that Sierra voted out Annika, instead of doing that, like, go send something really nice to Annika, like being that, like, and a lot of people are already doing that, but I think that's just an antidote to like a rapidly escalating problem that's already terrible and will truly only get worse from here.
Also, for me, like, coming on podcasts, it's kind of hard, because like, speaking about like not criticizing someone else's game, but like, you know, breaking it apart and talking about it. It's like, I've been on the island twice. I know how hard it is. I know that we don't get shown everything. I know that like we could be having this 2-hour podcast, but everything we say could not have happened at all.
Probably.
So we could all be wrong. So it's hard for me, to speak about someone, and I'm always trying to be respectful. Even with Rome, he was so patronizing, but I'm like, surely this isn't you in real life. You built this narrative of how you think Survivor should be.
I know, it's such an important point.
Yeah, internet.
Marian will be back.
Marian will be back, but
what do you think, Dino?
The point that Marian's raising is it is incredibly tough coming on to a podcast and criticizing other players' games when you know how tough it is to play the game when you don't have the information, when everything isn't so obvious. It's it really isn't. When you're playing that game, you don't have the information that we have at home. We have a lot more information than the players do in the game. So I desperately feel this point of Marian. So like, if you are a player listening to the podcast and we've criticized your game, here it comes. Sorry.
Yeah.
we're well aware that we're doing it from a point of watching it back, and it's just some views, and don't take it personally, and it doesn't invalidate the experience at all. I mean, what it's tough as players to come back, and there's awesome parts of your journey that don't get shown, or parts that you think you did well that don't get shown, or so that can be challenging, but it doesn't take away the fact that you've played Survivor, you've lived out this dream. It's an incredible achievement just to get on the show, never mind actually play it and live it out. So yeah, anyway, we've taken this down different podcast.
Sorry, Marian, what were you saying before the patriarchal internet tried to take down your important point?
Sorry, what was I saying?
Shannon was just telling me how everyone's complained that she's got a male co-host, and that she had to bring you on this podcast because her bringing a male guest on only was going to just bring immense hate. So you had to balance it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only reason we'd want Marian on this podcast, of course.
Yeah. It's not for your strategic prowess.
Yeah, man. Can people just not be so hateful?
Yeah.
Like in South Africa, we say, can you just be lekker? Like, just be nice. If you have nothing nice to say, shut up. That's it. Point blank period.
I really hate that I'm going to have this rant again so soon. Who knows for what reason? Like, definitely for the like, you voted out a woman thing.
And you know
what? Give up.
Yeah, like after 47 seasons, and like how many Australian seasons and South African seasons and New Zealand and, like, do people not realize that, like, we are people? We go on a reality show. We play a game for $1 million or 2 million rand or 1 million rand. Like, I mean, are you really telling me that you're going to get on an island and just sit there and be kumbaya and not fight and compete for $1 million? And
no, but you can only vote with the women. Marian, if you're a woman, then you have to put the course before your own game, because playing with that extra burden and making it more difficult for yourself is feminism. Aren't you keeping up with what feminism is, Marian?
It's so annoying, guys. For the millionth time, how you play Survivor, it's not really a true reflection of yourself. Yes, sometimes it is, but also there's like your favorites who, if you knew half their story, you would, so...
It's annoying.
Let's just change the subject.
Right. But I had a couple more people that I want to talk about before we get to the Chissy we haven't spoken about as much. Teeny, and also with that, the amulet.
Teeny.
Yeah, they chose
so
to they chose to burn the amulet, which was an interesting choice. Really speak this is the improved amulet, and they were still like, don't want it. As Andy said, it was basically a way to keep their votes. They play it on Teeny. Teeny was the one who gave up their vote, so that I think makes sense. And it's probably something that they, discussed, because they discussed telling everyone. They probably discussed, we'll just play it immediately, probably on Teeny. So that, and they probably told everyone when they told them we have the amulet, but like we're just going to burn it instantly. Which kind of makes Teeny's decision not to tell Soul even more confusing for me. Like, it wasn't something they were really going to be relying on, and whether people buy that or not is another thing. But that was an interesting way to go about it. What did you think, Dino, about the way that they chose to just burn the amulet?
Well, luckily, we don't need any insight here. I mean, you can just go back to Rome sitting in Jeff's seat and explain to everyone why it was the right move, right?
Yeah, that's my job. Rome. Save it for the On Fire podcast.
There we go. No, so yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. It's so many people know about it, and even if you didn't tell people were going to find out that you had a portion of it, And if you are successful in getting one of the other people out and it's now more powerful or more useful to you or whatever, you only become a bigger target for a longer period of time. So I say burn it. Build the relationships, give people the information, build the trust, and burn it instantly. So, and yeah, Tini gave up the vote. Fair play. Nobody else was at risk.
Well, Andy was getting those votes. I think that's the one thing where it's like Tini and Caroline should just act like they did not know that those votes were going on Andy, because then it might look like, wow, you didn't care that I was getting any other votes. Although, to be fair, at the point where they're playing it,
then you burn Sol. Again, it speaks to like
and then Tini's close with Sol, has had like a up and down relationship with Sol. I think that's difficult, but I will say at the point where they're playing the amulet, Rome hasn't said he's using his shot in the dark. He hasn't used an idol to this point. So that would be different. Like if Rome stood up and played an idol and you allowed the amulet to be played on Tini, knowing Andy was getting the votes, at that point it would be different, but we're very far away from that happening. So it should be coverable. Hopefully, again.
But then Andy goes home. So then Andy goes home. There's no fallout.
It's true. Then Andy's out of the game.
Goes home. There's no fallout. Except for maybe the Ghana people. But I mean,
you're right. They're part of that.
So there's no fallout there.
Yeah, I mean, so you know that Andy's going to get votes. You know that you didn't play the idol on him. But again, you know that it was so unlikely that he was going home, that there wouldn't be a bounce back. There's nothing else that's been played. Seems pretty okay, but yeah, I mean, if you're Andy, you might be upset and be like, wow, you really let this like wasted amulet go on Tini, who was never getting votes. I was getting votes. Did you know I was getting votes? Like there might be some conversations around that, even in the intense safety that Andy had. And that's why, again, it'd be like, I didn't know that Sol was putting one vote on you. That one defensive self-preservation vote from Sol, so easy to cover. At the point where it's a tribe thing, at the point where Sue is randomly doing it too, now Caroline, now all of us are probably answering to what the group is doing. So that probably speaks to why I wouldn't have done the 2 votes. But what did you think, Marian, about this as a move?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still confused, like why they chose to play it on Tini. I guess it's safe, just burn it. But yeah, I actually, going into tribal, I thought they were gonna play it for Sol, but then like after watching the episode, I'm like, okay, that would have been too risky. So yeah, like the 3-person amulet, it doesn't make sense to me in general. And again, like an advantage can only get you so far in the game. It's really about like relationships and connections. So I think they did the correct thing in just burning it.
My question for you, Marian, is how do you feel if you're in Andy's position now? You know, you've gotten 2 votes to what Shannon was saying. Even though you were dead safe, everyone knew you were dead safe, and you're going, well, what's the harm in having played it on me if you knew I was getting votes? Like, if you're really on my side, that extra protection would have gone a long way. From Andy's perspective, nobody else's, how do you feel as Andy about the 2 of them?
I would have probably been pissed off, but like, what if the 3 people that have the amulets just go to Andy and say, like, we never heard your name, so therefore we didn't play it?
Yeah, but then again, you have to cover for that. And then again, like, it's the intricacies of, oh, so you never heard Andy's name, so then what did you think was happening? Oh, you thought Sol was going? Oh, you're okay with me going? And like, there's a web here. But I do think like Andy is not entitled to that amulet. Like, he has a third of it. Yep. Tini gave up their vote. Tini's ally went home. Tini was going to tribal that night. Like, Tini is the one who did it. Like, they did it to save their votes. They're not trying for the amulet. So like, that might be upsetting, but I mean, like, I don't really feel like it was Andy's decision to make. Like, Tini is the one, and I'm sure that they made that decision at the time for Tini.
And Tini was tipsy half the episode, so were they even in the right mind?
I don't know. I was drunk.
You could be thinking straight Tini.
Wait, why did you lay it on me? It's like, I have the worst hangover, and I can't get into this right now. Truly, I didn't know what was going on. What did we do? We played the amulet? No. What is that?
Tini had moments where, when they were drinking wine, I just thought to myself, this is a lovable drink. This is your friend when you go out for a night. They just get more and more and more lovable as they drink, you know, and just I love you so much. You know,
we have Soul Survivor. We literally Soul Survivor so much because it's literally, this is it. Wait, why did you do that? I was so drunk.
I was so drunk.
I advocate more.
Also, she downed that wine like, I mean,
I think there should be more alcohol in Survivor, personally.
No, 100%. Also, you get so drunk from like 1 beer or 1 glass, like she was literally downing it.
Yeah, exactly. Just the best.
When you come to South Africa, you're more than welcome to come wine tasting with me and Dino's wife, Kirsten.
but not Dino.
Okay, and okay, yeah, it is.
See,
Amanda and Elise, you didn't get the invite either. So just...
It's an all-girls alliance, Dino. Kirsten's included.
Oh, so in other words, none of you will pitch and I'll be there.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I'm gonna get
to that. No, this was pretty good, I thought. Yeah, it's either a bounty or a difficult thing for the three of them to use, so it makes sense. And then the last person I wanted to talk about was Genevieve. We talked about, and like, so I said last week, the scales be tipping. I was all in on the move to take out Keyshawn. I thought it had agency. I thought it preserved a good alliance and like multiple good individual alliances for Genevieve. And then last week I was like, oof, now like Rome was even worse. Rome was worse to her than I think me or Genevieve expected. He threw her under the bus. He became unworkable. And this week that goes to its conclusion where they all have to get rid of Rome. Like preserving him was so much even worse than we could have, I think, possibly imagined. Or maybe you'd say she should have read that, and she should have known that, or she should have managed it better. And I think to me now, having seen the scales tip to the point of him being unworkable to going home in this fashion, I think the scales may be tipping to the point where now I'm like, I said 60-40 on her doing it, on voting out Keyshawn. I think I probably went to about 50-50 or maybe even 40-60 last week. And now, like, I think the tails of the scales have tipped to, I don't know. I don't think, to me, that was the move. Given how unworkable Rome ended up being, it was cool as hell. Genevieve is amazing. She seems really social. Like she can build now socially because of who she seems to be. But the basis point I think is worse because now I think I'm like, I still think I'd have given her the 3 Chissy points because interesting options abounded and it was just so well done. And I don't like hate it, but I don't know that I like it anymore of her keeping Rome. Like how can I say that given the way that it's gone for Rome and her? What do you think, Marian? Do Genevieve having to break from Rome after investing so much into Rome? How do you see like her move and where she sits now?
I think in the previous episode where, Rome gives her the information that like she's the backup name. He did it in such a way, like if you hear your name on Survivor, like when someone comes to you, even if you're the backup name, you got the votes down, but you hear like, oh my God, they're voting out Marian. There is nothing scarier in this world. Like, I can't explain it. So, I can kind of understand why Genevieve then chose to take Keyshawn out. She's like, oh my God, is he really throwing my name under the bus? Is this true? I get it. I hated the fact that she went with Rome and she voted Keyshawn out. I would have loved to see more of him. I think that he had so much game left in him. But I do like Genevieve, and I do think she's got enough like social and strategic capability to like weave herself through this merge. And one thing I got a note, and I said like, when they were looking for like that, sorry, I'm going off point, but when they were looking for like the merge advantage and herself and Sam are like on the cliff and she sees the buoy and Sam goes like, no, it's nothing. I actually thought Sam was going to run back and find it and he just chilled. Like she went back and she trusted a gut, and like there's few things more important in Survivor than like trusting your gut and your intuition. And I think like if she's going to keep trusting her gut, she's going to do very well in this game. And I just feel like she just reminds me of an old school player. She's like a little bit of Poverty. I've said it before, a little bit of Kim Spalding and so much Genevieve. And I'd like to see her go far.
Yeah, I think the hard thing with like Keyshawn throwing out her name is like that was unfortunate, and it did speak to how she was like a second priority to him over Teeny, and there was like some gap there where he wouldn't fully protect her. But then what Rome did the next episode was so much worse, where he like fully threw her under the bus to Soul, and it could be even worse, like that could be the tip of the iceberg for Rome. So I think it was like she went out of her way because that was so unforgivable with Keyshawn. She did this awesome move and flipped everything around and kind of severed other relationships possibly that she's had to build back with like a Teeny as an example to get rid of Keyshawn because that was such a scary action that he'd done. And then Rome, even though she was his first priority, like it showed that she was Keyshawn's second priority, but with like a first priority like Rome has for you, who needs enemies? Like even her being his number one ally, it was so bad. Like I'd rather be Keyshawn's number 2 than Rome's number 1 because we've seen that with him. What do you think, Dino? Where do you sit on the Genevieve move that I'm still analyzing 2 weeks later?
So I think like she did what she needed to do with the information she had at that point in time, and that's when it needs to be judged, right? it's the same as poker, right? You can go into a hand and you have, 2 outs with 2 cards to, or you can have like tons of outs. Let's say you've got 20 outs, 2 cards to play, and it's 40% odds of hitting, and you make a decision based on those 40% odds, and you don't hit or you do hit, whatever. You've made that decision at that point in time, and then the game plays out, and it might be an element of luck. If you do that 100 times, you end up being more profitable. Not in the case of 40%. I've used a bad example, but the principle is the same, right? And that's what it should be judged on, not necessarily, did that work out or not? Because you might have made a good decision that still has a bad outcome, if that makes sense, right? So I look at it this way: in that, at that point in time, you've got Tini and Kishan who are tied 2, and you're not breaking that. With the Kishan in the driver's seat, which was a major concern for her, right? Then you've got Sol, who's a bit of a free agent, and then you've got Rome, who was to a point really loyal to Genevieve. So you take out Kishan, you've broken up that tight 2 going further into the game, and you're maintaining what you thought was a loyal ally to you, who's openly shared information with you, right? Yes, he ends up throwing you under the bus, but that's not also the worst thing, because now she's actively saved Sol, where she can build a relationship with Sol. Tini has lost her number 1, or their number 1. So you've broken up a potentially tight duo, and you don't have a visible number 1 ally at this point in the game, where people are looking at, okay, cool, where are the power structures? A dangerous player isn't as dangerous as a dangerous 2 or 3. And the further you get down the line, the more powerful that 2 or 3 becomes, because more of the vote they make up. So I don't think Genevieve hurt her position by doing what she did, and her skill level shows that it actually didn't matter which route she went. She was going to make the best out of that outcome anyway, as she has done. And that speaks to more like the gifted player that she is that she can make that decision. And even though Rome did turn on her, she still got the favorable outcome. Rome's gone, she's still in a good position. So I'm happy to kind of park that one and move on. You've obviously quite hung up on.
We'll talk about it next week here on Genevieve's podcast. I'm not worried for her.
Yeah,
I'm also not worried.
I think she's phenomenal, man. She's really.
I can see her in final tribal council. She's great.
Yeah. I'm not worried for her, but I think that because she has the skills. Like, it could just be she's in a slightly better spot. But then, like, the whole game would be different. It's weeks. It's been weeks. Okay. Anyway,
if you're seen as if let's say you're in a better spot now, and you've got you've saved Rome, you're in a tight 3 with Kishan and Tini, so now you've got this like perception of a tight 4.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's like, hey, well, okay, which one are we going for then? Sorry guys, that is a very, very powerful structure there that we should dismantle. And who are we going for?
Yeah, that is true. It's crazy that that's not the intention that she has. She's not like, will be too big of a threat. That's not how we heard about it. If that was something she was thinking about, I do think it's valid. But she chose to keep Rome in the game. I think my issue is that it was just based on her thinking she could control Rome and then not being able to. So there's a little bit of a failure there, but I still think she rebounds okay. I mean, Rome last week threw her under the bus to Sol to work with him, and then this week was right on getting Sol out. Like, that's the level of whiplash that we're at with Rome. So it's very, very tough. You mentioned, I want to talk about a couple of these production decisions. You mentioned the advantage. What did you think about that, Marian, as a twist that they get on the beach and it's like, go find the thing? And how did you feel about that and how everyone kind of reacted to that?
It was weird that, like, everyone didn't look. Like, they looked and then they gave up. And I think Rachel says at Tribal Council, like, they didn't want to disappoint Jeff, but they also didn't really look. And again, props to Genevieve for trusting a gut, I guess the twist was kind of cool. That challenge looked very daunting. And, like, if I had the advantage and I had the choice to sit out the challenge and watch everyone
it's not doing a challenge. She stayed clean, which was great.
Yay.
Yeah, she got food. I don't think they even realized how big that advantage would be. It was a good advantage. Yeah. What did you think about it, Dino?
Conceptually quite good, but I think the production doesn't get what they want out of it because it says advantage in the next challenge. I think if they say advantage in the game, there's a far bigger dilemma that players face, right? For a number of reasons. I'm glad it's not an advantage in the game necessarily. Am I? I don't know.
Yeah,
because I don't like randomly. I don't like the randomness of just going out and randomly finding, But anyway, maybe it could be, a box within a box within a box. Who knows if that's ever been done before? But I think as a concept to try and split the players up, to give them that dilemma of, do I stay here at this critical time where I need to build relationships? And particularly when the game is so short now, you've got far less time to build those relationships. So you're sacrificing a lot more to go out for something that might just give you an advantage in one challenge, which, the relationships are going to keep you safer for longer than what the upside of one challenge is going to give to you. And the likelihood is everybody's going to know that you've got this thing anyway, because it's an advantage at the challenge. So I don't think the reward balances the risk in this case. I do think if it's bigger, it creates a far better dilemma, and it gets that, like, well, now I've got to do this, but I'm going to do it in a sneaky way, and now I've got to conceal it because everybody knows there is something and somebody's going to find it, and we've got to conceal it. I mean, this would have been a great time for the red paint, because then you've got like all time to clear clean your tracks. And
Sue, even with a lot of time, did not deal with that well. She does not she has not like solved the paint situation.
Slightly less paint. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I like it conceptually, but I don't think it has the impact because of the weighting of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a huge advantage. They just couldn't tell them, because then they would have spoiled that Mergatory was different and now it's just an immunity challenge. But I think that they could define the dilemma a little bit more, because Jeff seemed surprised that they weren't going for it. I mean, that was the most interesting part to me, is what would people choose? Would you choose to socialize if there's key I'm meeting you time, or would you choose to run around, possibly put a target on yourself as the kind of player that you are, and try find an advantage in the challenge? He seemed surprised that people might take one choice. No, the choice is what's fascinating here. So I would just define that dilemma, be like, you have an hour. Here's the hourglass. this is how we bring back the hourglass. This is the hourglass, and if not, then no one gets it. Or there's a small little picnic. Do you want to socialize? Really define that dilemma of social versus the hunt, which is something like Australian Survivor did in bigger terms earlier this season that I really liked. And I just would have done that. There was a lot of interesting stuff here from production. The schoolyard pick that we got in a secret scene. It is in a secret scene this week, if you haven't seen it. They're like, we're going to do a schoolyard pick, and then they didn't show it. Jeff said on the Fire podcast, he was like, there was just so much vote stuff, and it doesn't feel that way, although we have been here for 2 hours, so maybe there was more strategic stuff. But I don't know, for me, there was so much challenge.
That for the fun.
Well, it was just so. What, you think that they should have?
No, I think no. I don't think they should. I would have loved to have seen them squeeze that schoolyard pick in somewhere, right?
It was a 4-minute scene, so.
Yeah, that includes some confessionals about it, right? And how people felt.
We can cut some of those confessionals. This is a schoolyard pick. We get it. Move on.
And you can include some of the confessionals in the secret scene, perhaps, right? But maybe it's not so big on the story later on. But I think what I suspect is that they took a really fun approach to the edit and the dunking on the roam and the dunking here and whatnot, and they would have had to leave out some of that fun, which. If I had to have the trade-off, I'm going, give me the fun. It's refreshing. I like it. So, forgiven in that sense. But
the secret third option, you keep in the roam dunking, you keep in the schoolyard pick, and you cut the challenge. There was so much challenge. It was too much.
There was a lot of challenge. I will give you that.
You could definitely take 3 minutes out of that challenge.
Nice challenge, though. Nice challenge.
It was fine. But it was 30 minutes. Peter fell asleep. Okay? So... That's my metric. What did you think, Marian, about the schoolyard pick and the lack of seeing it?
I actually have a note for Jeff.
Oh, get ready.
So it's the first time we knew. When last did we have a schoolyard pick? So you bring something back, and we're all excited for it, and then we don't get to see it. I was like, am I watching Survivor, or am I watching the Anonymous? Because who's the captains? Who chose who?
Way above my head.
It's also such an interesting dynamic to see who the captains were and who the first picks were. And I was just like, Jeff, why would you bring something old school back and then just take it away from us? That's rude.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to see the schoolyard pick.
Well,
I think
it's a secret scene.
Okay, there's a secret scene, and I will go watch. But I think it should have been in the episode.
Yeah, especially because it was good content. There was Andy gets picked last, so he has a lot of that story telling about feeling like he's in middle school. It's also an interesting schoolyard pick because again, there's those social dynamics. There's the physical dynamics. There's the fact that like they can see both challenges, right? So you know who you're going to be working with to even get the reward and to get to play immunity with, but then you're going to compete against them in the immunity challenge. So if I'm looking at some of the like smaller women, I'm looking at like, wow, they're not going to help me on the like big lift. And then I'm going to compete against them in this balance challenge. I would assume they're going to beat me. Like you would think Andy would go earlier from that perspective. Like he has brute strength. And then probably you would think like someone who keeps falling off hammocks and boats is not going to win the immunity challenge. So there was an interesting kind of dynamic there. Which we missed because it wasn't in the episode. But I do agree, all of the fun editing stuff with Rome and the previously on and him sitting in Jeff's chair, like some people think it's, you know, sacrilegious to kind of start messing with it. But I'm like, we're 24 years in. I always love the meta editing quirks. I'm a big like Scrubs and Community fan. That stuff really works for me. And I thought, yeah, that stuff was really fun. They made the most of this big character that they had in Rome for his final swan song. And I think they did that very well. I wouldn't have lost any of it. I just would have cut so much of the challenge if I could. So that's where I'm at with it. Do we have anything else?
Oh, not the part where Gabe throws his buff down in anger, because the one person that's getting constant content throughout, which I find interesting from an air perspective, is Gabe. He's a great narrator. He's trying to put on this really chill vibe, but there's these moments of like frustration that boil over, which I find quite interesting. Like when the pressure's on, like they're in that in the maze, which in my opinion they were approaching in the incorrect way, and Sol was correct in how I believe from a skill perspective should be approached, right? He lashes out, and then at the end of the challenge, you see him throw his buff on the ground. I'd say in disappointment, but there was this frustration and aggression, and then he very quickly de-escalates and then hugs the group and so he does very, very well to do that. But it was interesting to see that moment of frustration come out in that way, that anger. And then I just found it interesting that he gets that moment at Tribal Council where he verbalizes, says it's not important to be the architect of the move, but it's important to know where the votes are going. I found that a very interesting piece that they include, because in philosophically or strategically, I believe that. I agree with that. You can't build every move, and you shouldn't. This is a collaborative game, and it's very important to know where things are going. You don't have to drive everything. You just have to understand it. That's the way I see it. So I see it in the same way. But I found it interesting that he's getting that kind of strategic content plugged in here and there. So that was just a kind of extra note here. Otherwise,
honestly, a lot of the challenge stuff was interesting. Like him being with Rome on that, and the frustration of that is probably fair. I think Steven said like the different ways that they approached getting up like the big wall was really interesting. It was just like then and then the mud, and then there was another challenge. Then if you consider the fact that finding the advantage on the treasure hunt was like a third part, it was kind of like just like a 3-part challenge. I'm sure we could have found 3 minutes there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would have been my... Yeah, but I mean, let's get to the Chissy, and then any one we want to talk about, we'll find the space. But take it away, Jake Sega-Weinstein and MC Color.
1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of Chissy. 3, 2, 1.
Guys, I finally worked out how to not have it loop. It was just one button, but I still think the volume was a little low, and that's what I'm going to solve for next time. But we're getting it. And we have the Chissy charts here. Dino, do you want to start? Marian, she wants you to start.
We're still doing 3, 2, 1, right?
We're doing 2, 1, 1 because there's 3 of us.
2, 1, 1.
That's but do your 2, 1, 1 where the 1 is like one star, where it would be the 1.
Can I just make it known that my first ever Chissy point that I received was from Marian.
Aww.
And that was it was a pity point.
Was it?
Yeah.
There'll be none of that. Anyway, so I'm going to award, Sam's on 11, Rachel's on 1. So I'm going to award 11 Chissy points to Rachel.
That's how that works.
You put your 2 1s together.
No. So which way do you want to start? On the 1, 1 or the 2?
It doesn't matter.
Sure. My definitely the 1 is for me going to Kyle. I think he had a stellar episode.
The better one or the worst one?
Oh wow!
Oh, the better one or the worst one?
Would this be your 2 in a normal one? Will just be your 1?
Yes.
The 2 really. So this is actually, a weird I know I said it doesn't matter, but this is a pretty strange place to start.
Going into this, I had 3 for Kyle, 2 for Sol, 1 I was in the air. But having had this discussion, I'm higher on Sol now after this episode.
Okay.
So the better one is going to
Kyle, but that's really 1. Yeah,
that's really 1. And then 2 to Sol. I just think he's showing exceptional growth in his game, and I'm absolutely loving it. I love his approach, and I think this was a really strong episode for him. Awesome work, Sol, and great to. Hey, there's no worse one. That makes it sound bad. It's like you're getting the wooden mic. No.
It's just not as good as the first
-1.
It's important for the charts because that's how it'll be ordered.
Originally, I had it for Caroline just because of the way she approached Sue, but I think I'm actually going back to Genevieve. I like, Mary makes good points on Genevieve trusting her gut. She's usually likable. I think she just had although it wasn't like a massive episode, it wasn't massive for her. I think she's doing all the right subtle things really, really well. And big up to you for going out and finding that advantage, taking the bait, having no blowback of finding an advantage of any sorts, and still managing to cultivate relationships when there's no time. So yeah, and then a special mention to Sue, going toe to toe with Kyle at the end there, outlasting everybody in the individual. At 45, impressive. At 46, which she really is, because we know she lied about her age. I know, really good going. I think she's done well, and I'm looking forward to seeing her, in more challenges going forward and showing her mettle.
Nice. What do you think, Marian?
So
restarting.
Myself and Dino are so in sync. I've also got Chissy points for Kyle, Sol, and Genevieve, but I had like the 3-to-1 system. So I'm gonna give 1 to Genevieve.
Which one?
Because I really the one that comes after the better one.
To the worst one.
Before.
Okay.
Genevieve, I love you.
Marian hates you is what
gave her a point.
Marian hates women.
You didn't do that much in this episode. It's pretty good for
Genevieve. In my mind,
we're giving the worst one to the woman.
So I'm gonna give.
Yeah, how dare you, Marian, give a worse one to a woman? As a woman, are you even a feminist? And people should attack you for that opinion. So.
Oh, they're probably going to, but I won't be quiet. Okay, Genevieve, I'm gonna give Genevieve 1 Chissy point. I love her. I see something so special in her. The fact that she trusts her gut. It's so special to me, and it's also something that's like very personal to me. So 1 for Genevieve. Then I'm gonna give 2. Oh, my other one. Sorry, to Kyle.
The better one. Yeah.
The better one to Kyle. I think he handled the Rome situation really well. He got out of it really well. Him at the merge feast saying, I don't like what Rome is doing to us. I thought it was so powerful. And then I'm gonna give 2 to Sol.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came out the victor during the Rome battle, and I think he's just the way that he planted the seeds so subtly, the things he said to the people who said it and how he said it. It was done in such a beautiful way. And so my player of the week is Sol.
Yeah, Sol won the fishy as well. Yeah, and I'm also going to give him the 3, which is now the 2, which means it's across the board for Sol. That he has got all the available points from 3 people, which is pretty good, I think. The installation that people seem to care about, protecting him even to the point of the vote. Again, at the feast, they don't know, but at the point of the vote, they do. And they, I think, erroneously put themselves out there for him for the second vote, at the very least. And then I think he pushed well and subtly against Rome, won that battle with Rome, which I'm sure he is elated about. I've also given my better one to Kyle. I was going to give him 3 points originally because he really did push it the most, but I took away the point for that kind of like misreading of Rome, and then I think he recovered from that really well. And then I'm going to give my 1 point, which on the rewatch I decided to do this. I'm going to give my worst one to Tiana. Tiana, who I really didn't think was coming in a good spot, given, last week I didn't like how she just threw out Gabe's name, but wasn't an option here as, that we saw. And even if that was more that they, Rome buried himself and people didn't want to kind of go against that, I do think that she did well in reading Rome correctly. When he comes to her with that information, she goes back to Kyle. She trusts Kyle over him. I think that is correct. Kyle is a good ally for her. Rome isn't a good option for her. Yeah, and I think she pushed that well and seemed to kind of make some connections through that. Yeah, so I'm giving 1 to Tiana. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Caroline, who I wanted to kind of squeeze in. I think she handled it well with Sue, even though Sue might be a bit of an issue for her. I think she's been playing well throughout, and I think she seemed to handle Rome really well. Like, he specifically mentioned, like, Caroline's eating this up, and I know that they all blindsided him, and it's not so amazing to blindside Rome because 12 people just did it. But I felt like she especially was, like, putting in the work with that and did very well. Yeah, and those are the numbers, which means Sam's on 11. Now I'm doing the quick math that everyone can see. Sue's on 9, Teeny's on 9. Genevieve's actually gone up to 10 now. And Sol's now on 9, and Rome left on 7, which is kind of crazy in hindsight, but he was doing a lot. Andy's on 7, Kyle's on 3, and Gabe's on 2, Caroline's on 2, Rachel's on 1, Tiana's now on 1, and Asia left on 1. And I think that is right. Yeah.
What's quite crazy is to not see Sierra with any points, because she's done so many things throughout the season. It's absolutely crazy. And I can get it episodically, but she's just done so much. And I think she's a great gifted player. And we haven't, because of the episode, we haven't been like singling it out. But I think it's mad. I think there's a lot of iterations here where you know, like a Sierra could be doing some big things, and she's just not getting that edit. So,
well,
yeah, I think it's because Sam's getting all the points that would have gone to her.
Well, she like suffers in the points, I think, in that like Sam won that battle against her last week, or maybe she's done like little things like giving Andy like the breadwinner name or things like that, where I'm taking away the point, but she's not getting the solid points every week, but she should be getting like almost like consecutive, just like maintenance points on how good a relationship she had with everyone in her tribe, and the fact that she was even in the position to make decisions, like those kind of relationship points, which aren't the flashy like 3, 2, 1, but are like just solid throughout, she doesn't get. And that might be a flaw in the Chissy system, but we didn't say it was perfect. We just said that it was excellent. So look, I mean, you won, Dino, and Marian didn't win. We can still contest that to this day. So
100%.
Yeah, we don't...
what were you guys thinking? Get better guess.
Exactly. The Chissy, we don't know what's going on. That's all I have. Do you guys have other things? Did you have other things in your notes you wanted to discuss?
I covered everything.
Not from the episode. But I will say, I think earlier we were talking about, toxic fans and whatnot. And before we came on, we were talking about the healthy fans. So if I may, for a moment, just big shout out. Shannon, thanks for hooking us up with Matt Knoll. Marian and I both had great chats. So if you're
Did I do that?
You put in a good word for Matt. So we'd been chatting and you were like, oh, Matt's amazing. Because I asked you about, Matt, because I saw you added him. And you put in a great word for him. So if you're a player and Matt Knoll reaches out to you, chat to the guy, you'll have such a great time. Great fan, super cool. Shout out to Jeremy. Shame reached out to Shannon. He was visiting SA. He's having an incredible trip. It was a pleasure to meet Jeremy. So it's always good to meet RHAP fans. So when you are out the side, don't be shy. Reach out to like me, Marian, and the other castaways. It'd be great to meet you. And then a longtime fan who became a friend as well is AJ Arjun, who has the most incredible views, who I feel, like somebody who's also able to peel back the layers of the game and that I enjoy chatting to. So yeah, to the RHAP fandom and the really, really rad fans that support it. It's always great, being able to be here chatting about these things, living the dream, and to be able to meet the cool fans that support it. So yeah, thanks to you guys.
So many fans are the best. I know we did the rant, but that was about the minority and they suck.
Yeah.
Good ones. Wow.
Yeah.
They're the light.
Five ways. Yeah. And I think Marian go away with no anxiety here. What an absolute.
Yeah, we had so much fun, Marian.
Smashed it out the park and just
we did
send
so
all
much,
your love
so
that way.
much
Tell
fun.
about how amazing she is. Yeah.
This was so fun. Thank you for coming on. We really both
Thank you for having me. I must say, also, I'll say shout out to Matt Knoll. I actually came out of hibernation for Matt. Yeah, he slid into my DMs quite months ago, but me being so not tech savvy, I didn't know that you had a request DM box. So yeah, I found a lot of messages from my season of Survivor as well as Matt's. But Matt's lovely. He's amazing. We spoke for about 2 hours. He's incredible.
Aww. Well, where can people find you if they want to slide into the DMs that you can now find? Marian, what do you have going on? Where can people get in touch with you and follow along with you?
They can find me on Instagram. That's Marian _De Vos, MARIAN_DEVOS.
And Dino, what about you? Where can people keep up with you?
My content is non-existent and pretty much sucks. So if you're into that, if you want to follow stuff from 2 years ago, at also Dino on Instagram, pop me a message. Or no, at that guy Dino on Instagram. Jeez, I don't even know. That's how bad it is. And at also Dino on X. Do we say X or do you still say Twitter?
No, Twitter.
I always say Twitter. Yeah, on Twitter. Thank you. I don't know how it goes down. So yeah, pop a message. Always good to hear from you guys.
Well, I loved having the Mariano Alliance on the podcast. It was so much fun. Next week, another alliance, the Invisible Hand, Mark and Eden, both of them will be my guests to talk through another episode, which I think is looking like the split tribal. So we don't have a sense of what the dynamics will be. I'm given this like big, homogenous, unanimous pretty much vote, and we probably won't get to learn them too. But we will talk about it next week with the Invisible Hand. I will say an interesting stat that I had. Roll Fact Checker let me know that the average number of people who get the Chissy points in a regular New Era season is 12.4, but never less than 12. And we just, that with Kyle now getting points, we're on 12. So that's where we're at. We'll see how much further we get from now that 12 people have points. But yeah, the fact that Sierra doesn't, given that, does look pretty bad. We never said it was perfect, okay? Just said it was fine.
There's another amazing fan there, Costa, Rob's fact checker. I mean, one incredible, absolutely awesome human as well. There's plenty.
He fosters cats. It's not just about the stats.
We could have our own
cats with him, the two best things. Yeah. Yeah, Costa's amazing. So, yes, those are the stats on the Chissy. The fans are amazing. Follow me at Shannon Guss. I think that's all that I have. Did I have more? Yeah, I'm thinking now about how, Sierra doesn't have Chissy points. I feel like that should be the tagline for the Chissy. The Chissy, it's just fine. No, I love the Chissy. It's great. Thank you both. This was the best. I had the best time chatting with both of you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks so much. Thank you to our amazing listeners. Thank you to the team behind the scenes, and I will see you next week. Bye.